bit longer than that in order for the stream to get alive and well across the internet. If you're not familiar with the program, we do multi-stream on a number of different platforms, places like Facebook and Twitter and Periscope, and YouTube always takes just a quick second to get going, and it looks like we are live, so let's get started. Hello, my friends, and welcome back to yet another episode of Watching the Watchers Live. My name is Robert Gruler. I am a criminal defense attorney here at the R&R Law Group in the always beautiful and sunny Scottsdale, Arizona, where my team and I, over the course of many years, have represented thousands of good people facing criminal charges. And throughout our time in practice, we have seen a lot of problems with our justice system. I'm talking about misconduct involving the police. We have prosecutors behaving poorly. We have judges not particularly interested in a little thing called justice. And it all starts with the politicians, the people at the top, the ones who write the rules and pass the laws that they expect you and I to follow, but sometimes have a little bit of difficulty doing so themselves. And that's why we started this show called Watching the Watchers, so that together we can shine that big, beautiful spotlight of accountability and transparency back down upon our very system with the hope of encouraging some meaningful change. We are very happy and grateful that you are here with us today. We've got a lot to get through. We're going to start by talking about this guy, Brandon Straka. Straka? I don't know how it's going to probably come out multiple ways, but we're going to be talking about him. He was the founder, or at least somebody very closely connected to the WalkAway movement, which is this big movement to say, hey, if you're a Democrat, it's about time to walk away. Come join the other side. If you're a Democrat, the dark side. And so he got arrested yesterday, I think right as we were getting on the broadcast, and we have a copy of the complaint, copy of the document from the FBI that was signed off on by the judge, and we're going to go through that a little bit. We're going to talk about Ted Cruz introduced a new amendment or a joint resolution in the Senate, or is in the process of doing so, calling for term limits for Congress. Not a bad idea. We're going to run through what that looks like. We have a copy of the document, so we'll show you what's inside. We're going to be talking a little bit more, actually a lot more, about the impeachment proceedings. Yesterday, the article of impeachment that we've covered a lot on this channel was transmitted from the House of Representatives over to the Senate, and I was expecting a little bit more fanfare. I was expecting a little bit more news coverage. I don't think I even saw it trending on Twitter, but apparently, well, it is what it is. We'll see what the media has to say about it, but it is, there's a lot of activity going on. So we're going to be talking about that. We've got a list of where the senators stand, who's going to be voting to convict Donald Trump and who isn't. We've got some information about what Donald Trump is doing himself. So he is taking some action, I think, that might influence how this whole thing turns out. We want to brief you on that. Senator Rand Paul was on the floor of the Senate today for about 10 minutes, just tearing into this whole impeachment debacle. And so we've got some clips from him as well as some of his arguments. Near the end of the program, we're going to talk about the Portland mayor, Ted Wheeler, who you've seen in the news a lot about these Antifa protests that have been taking place in Portland for, 6-7 months now, maybe even longer than that. And very recently, a police report came out with his name in it. So we're going to give you an update on what that means. And then we're going to wrap up the show with a bad Popo out of Texas who was threatening to taser somebody. Didn't come down to that, but, not too good. And more. We're going to stick around and do the live chat after the show. So if you have any questions as we're going through this presentation in the news, feel free to send those over to Miss Faith, or just send them in and Miss Faith will clip them and then we'll address them at the end of the program. Another quick reminder to subscribe to our channel. Of course, we go live every day at this time of the week, every day of the week at this time rather. And we would love it if you were here and joined us in our journey. So a like, a thumbs up, a share, invite somebody else, join us in the super chat. If you want a copy of the slides, if you want a copy of my free book, if you want a copy of the impeachment templates or the existence systems, if you want to just hang out with some pretty dang cool people, then head on over to Locals. That's where we're continuing the conversation both before and after the show. And as I mentioned, a copy of the slides will be posted there. So the address is watchingthewatchers.locals.com. It's all free. If you want to participate, it does require you to pay, I think, $5 a month in order to comment and share some links and support the show. It all goes to a good cause in my humble opinion. So let's get into the material. As I mentioned, I want to start off with Brandon Straka over in Oklahoma. we have a news story over from KETV, and it says here that Omaha FBI agents arrest the founder of WalkAway campaign for actions during the U.S. Capitol attack. And let's run through this article, and then we're going to break down what the criminal complaint looks like. So it says Brandon Straka, 44, arrested Monday by FBI agents. Court documents show that officials were tipped off about the Straka posting a video near the Capitol entrance shouting, "Go, go." The video was later removed because he deleted it. And officials said they could not find or any video post on his Twitter page related to the activity because he deleted it. However, FBI was sent multiple screenshots, so a lot of other people on Twitter were not happy that he was there, and they were taking screenshots of everything. The screenshots show images of quote, "Patriots at the Capitol, hold the line." Another quote from him saying, "I arrived at the Capitol a few hours ago as Patriots were storming from all sides. I was close to entering myself," so he didn't actually go in the building, "as police began tear gassing from the door, I inhaled tear gas, got it in my eyes. Patriots began exiting shortly after, saying Congress had been cleared." He goes on, "I'm completely confused. For 6 to 8 weeks, everybody on the right has been saying 1776, and that if Congress moves forward, it'll mean a revolution. So Congress moves forward, Patriots storm the Capitol, and now everybody is virtue signaling their embarrassment that this happened." He says also, "Be embarrassed and hide if you need to, but I was there. It was not Antifa at the Capitol. It was freedom-loving patriots who were desperate to fight for the final hope of our republic because literally nobody cares about them. Everyone else can denounce them. I will not. Perhaps I missed a part where it was agreed that it would be a revolution of ice cream cones and hair braiding parties to take our government back from lying, cheating, globally interested swamp parasites. My bad." And it just kind of goes on and on. A lot of the stuff that we're going to go through is directly from him. It's stuff that he posted on the internet, which, as I've been saying for a couple weeks now, not such a good idea. If you're even closely related to any criminality, the last thing you want to do is talk about it. And probably the even further last thing you want to do is post it on social media where it's going to be gobbled up by anybody who doesn't like you or by law enforcement themselves. We've been seeing this pattern for a long time since the Capitol Hill riots, but a lot of these criminal prosecutions are taking place because people posted online. They posted pictures from inside the Capitol building. They were, Instagram storying it. If you're going to be on the Senate floor and you're about to get arrested, you might as well get some of those stories posted on Instagram. And so we're going to dive into it. Let's wrap up with this article. It says, according to the documents, one video showed an officer from the U.S. Capitol Police holding a protective shield. And we're going to see here in the document that it goes through this where he's saying, or him and the crowd are yelling, "Take the shield. Take it, take it." Officials learned that Straka was described as a former liberal, the founder of the WalkAway campaign. The campaign website describes the campaign as a, quote, "grassroots movement" that was founded by Straka. And the website states that the campaign encourages and supports those who on the left to walk away from the divisive tenets endorsed and mandated by the Democratic Party of today. He's currently in federal custody, and he should have had his first initial court appearance today. Don't really know what the outcome of that is, but this is another image from the article. That is who we're talking about. And this is the criminal complaint that was originally filed in the United States District Court for the District of D.C., Washington, D.C., and it was assigned to Judge Robin Merriweather. We've seen her name around before. We have complaint with arrest warrant, and the criminal complaint looks like on or about January 6th. These are the charges that they are alleging in this complaint. It was signed off on by an FBI agent, Jeremy Desor, and 3 charges, it looks like. We've got impeding law enforcement officer during civil disorder. Number 2, knowingly entering, remaining on restricted grounds without lawful authority, engaging in disorderly conduct. We got another one. Number 3, engage in disorderly conduct with the intent to disturb a hearing before Congress. So you kind of have a couple sort of general concepts of like disorderly conduct and trespass, but they're elevating them based on where this happened, which is the Capitol building, and the proceeding that they're trying to interrupt is the congressional proceeding, a pretty important proceeding that was taking place on January 6th. So let's break down the criminal complaint and the arrest warrant affidavit. It says here, on January 11th, and this is being written by the FBI agent, it says, on January 11th, I was informed the FBI had received a tip indicating that Brandon Straka had posted a video on Twitter depicting a location near an entrance to the U.S. Capitol on January 6th, when she shouted, "Go, go." I conducted open source searches for Straka and found he was active on Twitter with the username @BrandonStraka. As of this evening, the video near the Capitol was no longer on his account. So he went through and just deleted everything. Open source searches revealed that he was described as a former liberal. We saw that in the article. That was founded back on May 26, 2018. Website stated that it encourages people to leave the Democratic Party because it's all full of race baiters and vandalism and vitriol and all that stuff. He says, "We are the future of this great nation." And so I'm not real sure why they went into all of this detail on this document, other than to say maybe, he's part of an organized movement. Remember, what we're seeing here, a lot of these complaints and these affidavits, these indicate they're trying to indicate that these people are connected with some more sinister groups. We've seen some of the Proud Boys stuff. We've seen some white supremacist groups. We've seen now the WalkAway people, and so he's saying they're closely connected to this group. Let's see where it goes. The complaint goes on. After reviewing his Twitter account, I discovered he had posted 58-minute video of himself on January 7th in which he discussed the events of the 6th. So he posted this the day after. A couple quotes. I literally just got home minutes ago from D.C. Yesterday, a lot of us got up very, very early, went to the event where Trump spoke. The plan was to go to the Capitol. We were going to march from that event. We were going to go to the Capitol. There was going to be another rally. I was one of the speakers slated to speak at the Capitol. He stated that while riding the metro to the Capitol, he received alerts on his phone stating Pence was, quote, not going to object to certifying Biden. And Straka then stated he learned on his walk from the metro that people had, quote, breached the Capitol and the Patriots had entered the Capitol. Straka said to himself then, wow, so they're going to basically storm and try to get into the chamber so they can demand that we get the investigation that we want. And this is, it's not a real long complaint. I would say about 4 or 5 pages, but a lot of what the complaint is very similar to other complaints that we've seen. They go through and they give a lot of background on what was taking place on that particular day, why this was such an important day. They go through and they talk about Mike Pence, they talk about the counting of the electoral votes, about Congress being in session, and on and on and on. So I just kind of skipped over that stuff, and we're going to pick back up where they're talking about that officer in particular, the officer where apparently they were saying, take it away from him. So let's back up. Individuals pushed past the officer toward the entrance of the Capitol. The officer held his shield up in the air at around 3:59 of the video. Straka then says, take it away from him. Straka and the others in the crowd yelled, quote, take the shield. As several people in the crowd grabbed the officer's shield, Straka yelled, take it, take it. So, very close proximity to an officer, very clearly interfering with what that officer was doing. The crowd successfully pulled the shield away from the officer as the officer appeared to be trying to move back towards the entrance of the building. The officer then went back to the crowd to get his shield back. Several people pulled on the shield as the officer grabbed it, thus pulling the officer deeper into the crowd. So sort of a tug of war over this shield, and the officer is eventually sort of consumed by the crowd. A large group of people then simultaneously pushed the officer towards Straka. Others chanted USA, USA. The officer was able to get his shield back and then appeared to exit the crowd by going through the entrance to the U.S. Capitol. And Straka then moved closer to the entrance and appeared to get within a few feet of the doorway. And as he neared the entrance, he turned the camera to him to film himself, stating, they're using gas. We're being gassed right now. And this is a screenshot from the portion of the video. So they're all wearing their masks. And he flipped it around. He's saying they're being gassed. So you see a lot of people in there very much resembling what we saw on January 6th. In the video, Straka was wearing the same hat, sunglasses that he wore during his videotaped speech at the Stop the Steal rally on January 5th, a day before. And it's the same, they have another screenshot there. He says at around the 7:35 mark, a male exiting the U.S. Capitol could be heard saying, we did our job. We got our job done. The individual then said, let's get out of here. Another individual stated, mission accomplished. The video ended with Straka still in the area at the top of the steps near the entrance, but not having entered the building. So that's kind of where we get into the totality of the facts there. So it looks like, this guy, from what we can gather, never actually entered into the building, but did get into a little bit of an altercation, presumably with the officer. Now, we don't know if he was just yelling things or if he was actually physically engaged in a tussle over this shield that ultimately ended up, sort of being resolved. It sounds like that officer just sort of left, entered back or escaped the crowd by going back into the Capitol building. And a couple things happen. Then they say, okay, we're done, mission accomplished, let's get out of here. And so from this document, it doesn't look like that he actually went into the building. So, this is going to be interesting because, let's finish this up and see what they want to charge him with. So based on the foregoing, your affiant submits there is probable cause to believe that he violated the U.S. Code, which makes it unlawful to obstruct, impede, or interfere and or to aid, abet another person to obstruct, impede, or interfere with any fireman, law enforcement officer engaged in lawful performance of official duties during the commission of a civil disorder or in any way obstructs anything that's federally protected. We've got another charge. A federally protected function means a function, operation, or action carried out under the laws of the United States by an officer or employee thereof. Your affiant knows the U.S. Capitol Police are federal law enforcement agencies. So We've got a couple charges about that. We've got another one. There's also probable cause that he violated U.S. Code 5104E2D, which makes it a crime to willfully and knowingly utter loud, threatening, or abusive language or engage in disorderly, disruptive conduct at the place, in the grounds, or near the Capitol building. So signed off on by Special Agent Jeremy Desor of the FBI, and then the judge approved it on January 19th, Robin Merriweather. And as is usually the case, these things will start out as sealed records, and then they become public. And it looks like this was filed back about 6 days ago, and we just learned that the arrest took place yesterday. So he's still in custody, probably saw a judge today. We'll be very curious to see what his release conditions are. But the question here is, what we're trying to do with all of these cases is identify, sort of tease out what the timeline looks like and what conduct is criminal, that is close to sedition or treason, and it warrants a 20-year sentence, or what charges warrant, probation, or some classes, or even according to the article we talked about yesterday, maybe even non-prosecution, right? The Department of Justice under Biden now is sort of having a conversation amongst themselves within the community of the U.S. attorneys and the people who are involved in this, and trying to decide whether they're going to charge a handful of these people. And their excuse yesterday was because, well, it's just a lot. We've got a lot of people, 800 people, 700 people, maybe 900. That's a lot. And I think that's a bunch of hogwash. Okay, courts are used to dealing with a lot of cases, and all of these don't need to be filed right now. They can be filed over an extended period of time. And that might sound weird from a criminal defense attorney saying, wait a minute, why shouldn't these cases just be abruptly dismissed? Well, I think it's because if it is, it's going to just further politicize our justice system. You're going to see this as a talking point for the end of days. You already see it as a talking point now. You see the media saying that there are these massive 2 tiers of justice, white cops letting white people go, and it's just going to further exacerbate, I think, a lot of the tension that currently exists as it is. Now, just because these people, in my mind, should be prosecuted for actual crimes that are alleged and provable, I'm not saying that they should prosecute people who have no close relation to what happened on the Capitol Hill riots. We've talked about this too. A couple of people were not even there the day of, and they're being charged and prosecuted for angry text messages or scary words that they sent across state lines when they were communicating with other people who were involved in the Capitol Hill riots. And so I have a great concern that this is going to expand beyond the reasonable bounds of where it should. We're already seeing that. They're saying there are calls that libertarians now are part of extremist groups, and that basically anybody who doesn't just take a knee and bow down to the government is an extremist by many new standards that are being set. And that is very troublesome to me. And so what I would like to see happen is, yes, anybody who was there who committed a crime that is provable in court, those should be prosecuted. And I don't want to hear an excuse that there's too many cases. Should those people go to prison for 20 years? Of course not. Absolutely not. Not even close. I think that if you got caught up in a moment, if you got caught up in, a fervor, that happens. It happens all the time. You see that happen in baseball games, football games, sporting games, happens out at the bar, happens out at, birthday parties and Thanksgiving. Stuff happens. People get riled up. They get caught up in a wave. Doesn't necessarily mean that they're bad. It doesn't mean that they're bad people at all. They just had a bad night or a bad day. And so I think a more reasonable approach here would be to say, okay, look, we're going to put you on probation for a certain period of time. As long as you don't break the law again, as long as you don't get in trouble again, we're just going to ultimately dismiss the charges. This is called a diversion agreement. It happens all the time in criminal law. If you do something good, then they're going to drop the charges against you, but it's an exchange. It's an agreed upon, the government's going to get something out of it because you are now going to go take an adult responsibility class or whatever. And in exchange for doing that, they will ultimately drop the charges against you. And so I think something like that would be more reasonable. I don't know necessarily about Brandon's case. I'd be very curious to see how closely connected he was to any physical altercations with the officer or anybody else, any other law enforcement. But 20 years for that, sedition for that, that's a little bit ridiculous in my mind. And when you're talking about a situation like this, you have to wonder if there's any political animus there or any retribution going on. Just curious. But largely, he was in a bad spot at a bad time, and it sounds like he was pretty aggressive about it, right? He was out there saying specifically, take your shield, take it. And I don't see any context where that is acceptable. You're not allowed to do that. You can't go storm the Capitol just because you're unhappy with what's going on inside. And that's a no-no. But sedition, treason, is this really insurrection? He said the point was made, mission accomplished, we're done. So they wanted to go and sort of exercise their voice and then get out of here. The whole thing got carried away and totally out of hand. But we'll see where this goes. It's not a good thing to betray the Democrats. They do not like that, and Brandon Straka was caught right in the middle of it. So we'll see where that goes and follow that along. I'm very curious to see what his release conditions are. You may have noticed that we've seen other people that do not get released, and we've seen another bucket of people that get released very easily. And so thus far, there hasn't really been a lot of rhyme and reason as to what is happening. And we've been trying to follow some of these cases so we could identify a pattern. In particular, if I had to hypothesize, I would say that all of the police officers who were there, anybody who was a part of law enforcement who was there, and now we know that there's a handful of cops who were there as part of the riots and the protests, I'm very curious, are they going to get a lighter hand than some of these other individuals? Only time will tell, and we will, of course, be covering it. All right, let's change gears a little bit. I want to talk next about Ted Cruz because he introduced a new bill that is seeking to limit the number of times a person can run in Congress, at least in the Senate. This article came over from Cruz, actually, from redstate.com and then from cruz.senate.gov. He posted a copy of the amendment that he is going to be submitting. And let's take a look at what is going on. It says Ted Cruz and Senate Republicans reintroduce term limits for the senators. Here's why we should cheer them on. They have once again introduced a constitutional amendment that would limit the number of years a person can serve in the Senate to 12. So that would be 2 terms. He's got Senator Rick Scott, Marco Rubio, Pat Toomey, Todd Young, Mike Braun, all of whom echo Cruz's sentiment that long-term service isn't healthy for the individual or for America. Every year, Cruz said, Congress spends billions of dollars on giveaways for the well-connected. Washington insiders get taxpayer money, members of Congress get reelected, all while the system fails the American people. It's no wonder that the vast majority of Americans from every political stripe, Republicans, Democrats, and independents, overwhelmingly support congressional term limits. The rise of political careerism in today's Congress is a sharp departure from what the founders intended for our federal governing bodies. I have long called for this solution for the brokenness of Washington, and I will continue fighting to hold career politicians accountable. As I have done in the past, I urge my colleagues to submit this constitutional amendment to the states for speedy ratification. And I posted about this over on Locals earlier this morning, and I was, my instinct on this, my gut instinct is to just say, well done, Senator Cruz. I've been very critical of these Congress people who've been in the government their entire lives. Most recently, I've been critical of Joe Biden, right? 37 years, I think, in government as a senator, as a vice president, now as the president. We've seen the same thing, and it happens on both sides. These very, very well-tenured senators and politicians. I think Dianne Feinstein is like almost 80. We have Senator Leahy, who is proposed to have been to be the judge on the impeachment proceedings. He's 80 years old, and they've just been basically in this position their entire lives. And, to me, that doesn't feel like it is as productive as it could be. They keep getting reelected. It's the same issues. Nothing is really getting solved. I think Congress's approval rating is like 13% these days. I mean, I would be very happy to see some fresh faces in there, see some changes, see some of the gridlock in Washington either resolved or eliminated or just addressed one way or the other. So that's my sort of instinct. And I was trying to think about some counter arguments to this. And I think the best one is that this is a democratic republic, right? We can vote. If we don't want those people in office, we just don't vote for them. That's what the check is. That's why the founders didn't put term limits into the Constitution, right? We didn't even have term limits for president until after FDR served 4 terms, and then suddenly America realized, wait a minute, now we're consolidating too much power. We're giving this one entity, this one individual, this one administration, the power to go in and create these massive bureaucracies that will then sort of support them and maintain their power for extended periods of time. And, I think that it's persuasive. I think I would agree that it's important that the American people get to vote and get to share their message and get to share their mind. during election season. But, right now we have a situation where it feels like to me that these Congress people just get so well entrenched and their name recognition is so high and they have so much party power and they have so much name recognition alone that even though America is just grossly sick of Congress largely across the board, they still keep voting the same people in over and over and over again. And so I would like to see that change a little bit. And so I wanted to entertain Ted Cruz's proposal. Here is the joint resolution. It says, proposing an amendment to the Constitution of the U.S. relative to limiting the number of terms that a member may serve. Mr. Cruz introduced the bill following joint resolution, which was read twice and referred to the committee on. Talking about the proposal again, says line number 1, resolved by the Senate and the House of Representatives of the U.S. that the following article is proposed as an amendment to the Constitution of the United States, which shall be valid to all intents and purposes as a part of the Constitution when ratified by the legislatures in 3/4 of the several states within 7 years after the date of its submission to Congress. And here's what it's saying specifically. Section 1, no person who has served 3 terms as a representative shall be eligible for election to the House of Representatives. So looks like they're only getting 6 years. For the purpose of this section, the election of the person to fill a vacancy shall be included as 1 term in determining the number of terms that such person has served as representative. Okay, so it's it's going to be included. If you're elected to fill a vacancy, that's going to be included as 1 term. So he's just defining what that means. So 3 total terms. The House of Representatives, you get 2-year terms. So that's 6 years. You get 6 years in the House of Representatives, and that's it. Sounds a little tight because in the Senate, you get double that. You get 12 years. No person who has served 2 terms as a senator shall be eligible for election or appointment to the Senate. For the purposes of this section, the election or appointment of a person to fill a vacancy shall be included. Same rule there. Section 3, no term beginning before the date of the ratification of this article shall be taken into account in determining eligibility for election. And so this is just only going to be forward facing. So if you are a sitting senator or a sitting representative, your existing term doesn't count as 1. So everybody else is sort of fair game. You can start from 0. Everybody starts from 0 if this thing were to be passed. And so you've got the House of Representatives limited to 3 terms, which is a total of 6 years. You've got the Senate limited to 2 terms, which is a total of 12 years. And that's the game. What do you think about that? What are the opposing arguments on that? I think this would be a good thing. I'm tired of seeing the same faces and the same regurgitated nonsense over and over and over. At least we can get a new face in there, and they're going to say the same regurgitated garbage, but it's going to be somebody different. And at least we get a little bit of a change of scenery. Is it ever going to happen? No, of course not. But it's nice. It's a nice thought. Sometimes we like to get into the clouds a little bit and think nicely, even though this is not going to happen. The senators want to be there their whole lives. They've got no other skill set other than going in and grifting off the American public. So they just want to be planted right there. They all want a number of shots at being a president someday. So they're just going to stay in that. 3 terms for a representative. Oh my gosh. Nancy Pelosi would have been gone a long time ago. I mean, how long has she been in there? How many terms has she had? So I don't expect it to go anywhere. All right, let's talk about impeachment because the impeachment stuff is heating up just a little bit. We are not going to be looking like we have a trial until next 2 weeks from now. I think February 8th is the date. Today is the 26th, so we've got about 2 weeks. It's going to start on a Monday is when it will start. So we've got all of next week, and then we're going to come back the following Monday, and then that's when the impeachment proceeding is going to start. Now, I've been very curious about what the public is going to think about this. And yesterday when we were on the show, I didn't see much about the article of impeachment. Remember, we went through the article of impeachment at length on January 13th. We had our whole #impeachment party. We had some fun with that. And we were waiting for the House of Representatives to transmit the article over to the Senate. The House does the impeachment, and then the Senate does the trial. And that is what will end up determining whether or not Donald Trump is convicted and then precluded from running from office again in the future. And the question was, well, where are these things? Where are the articles? If they impeached him, when are they going to start the trial? And so we've been sort of trying to figure out what the procedure will look like when the article hits the Senate. They were transmitted yesterday, and there just wasn't that much news about it. I was poking around the internet on the mainstream sites, New York Times and Washington Post and some of the others, and I just didn't see much about it. It was all Biden this and Biden that. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, this is like one of the biggest issues in the country right now. We're talking about the Chief Justice getting involved. We've got the Senate Majority Leader involved, Nancy Pelosi, who's the Speaker of the House. I mean, all of the Democratic officials have chimed in on this. Chief Justice Roberts is not a Democratic official, but he's close. And so he hasn't, he doesn't want to be the chief judge who is going to be overseeing the trial. We've got Chuck Schumer, who's very aggressively moving forward with this. Nancy Pelosi's moving forward with this. We've got Joe Biden now. We've got a statement from him saying that he's kind of given this whole impeachment thing his blessing. And I was thinking, okay, the country must be just up in arms over this. This must be a political issue that they're trying to seize on. Well, I go on Twitter and it wasn't even hardly trending. I don't think I saw it trending at all. And I'm thinking, well, that's kind of weird. I mean, this is, according to Chuck Schumer, this is like a Pearl Harbor event. Donald Trump was responsible for inciting an insurrection, inciting a coup that was close to taking out America. So why is this not getting more attention? I don't know. Is it because Donald Trump's not in office anymore? Is it because it feels overly political and the people just aren't responding to that? Well, let's see. They're moving full speed ahead. Here was Chuck Schumer saying that the trial is moving forward. Play.
The theory that the Senate can't try former officials would amount to a constitutional get-out-of-jail-free card for any president who commits an impeachable offense. There seems to be some hope that Republicans could oppose the former president's impeachment on process grounds rather than grappling with his actual awful conduct. Let me be very clear. This is not going to fly. The trial is going to happen. It is certainly and clearly constitutional. And if the former president is convicted, there will be a vote to disqualify him from future office.
All right, so they're going full speed ahead, and he says it's clearly constitutional. I think that's up for debate. There's a lot of individuals who are saying, not so fast there, Chuck. It may not be constitutional. And we were also talking about this over on Locals. Chris Wiseman over there had a great post from Jonathan Turley, and it's very instructive. I mean, this is like in law school, they would give you these examinations and these essay tests where they would make them as convoluted as they possibly could. And you get points for unwinding the ball of yarn and identifying issues and then trying to propose what the rule would be and then doing some analysis and coming to a conclusion. And what we're dealing with right now is it reminds me of a law school problem. One of these essays that's kind of, you can take it any which way you want it to go, especially because we're not talking about a court of law. We're talking about a political show trial, in my opinion. I mean, this whole thing was sort of done very quickly. They did what Jonathan Turley calls a snap impeachment, almost no discussion about it back on January 13th. The article of impeachment was very, very limited, very, very basic, couple problematic statements that Donald Trump made. They left out some of his more benign statements about peaceful and peacefully protest. And it just felt like totally outside of the ordinary bounds of due process. He didn't even get a fair attempt to make an argument. They just impeached him, boom, send it over to the Senate. And Chuck says it's constitutional. I think a lot of people are still debating that. Regardless, they are going to move forward. There are thousands of National Guard troops that are going to stay around D.C. This came over from the Washington Examiner. With the House set to deliver the articles of impeachment against former President Donald Trump, law enforcement officials have said as many as 5,000 National Guard troops will remain in the Capitol during the duration of the trial. Prosecutors, it says Trump's second impeachment will begin in mid-February after a period of time allotted for prosecutors and the defense to draft their legal briefs, during which time the Senate will address other business, Majority Leader Chuck Schumer said on Sunday. During this time, as many as 7,000 National Guard troops will remain in the district. The presence will continue to draw down to about 5,000 by mid-March. Troops will, quote, continue supporting federal law enforcement agencies with security communications. We request, at the request of the several federal agencies, will remain as long as needed, said a National Guard's spokesperson. So, it's a lot of, in my opinion, theater. They thought that they were going to get stormed the Sunday before the inauguration. Nothing happened. They then suspected there was going to be more protests, more violence the day of the inauguration. Nothing happened. And so they're just, keeping them around just to show, in my opinion, that Trump supporters are just very, very dangerous. Okay, extremely dangerous. So we just got to keep them around just in case they decide to go bananas again. All right, so frustrating stuff. Here is a clip from Newsmax. Now, this is from a woman named Emerald Robinson, and she's reporting that there is a behind-the-scenes push for secret ballots to hide the impeachment vote from the voters, which is very curious. Okay, we're going to go through very shortly. New York Times came up with this analysis of where the different senators stand. Are they going to be voting to impeach or voting to convict Donald Trump and remove him from office or not? And so one of the solutions that has been proposed to give these senators some cover is to just have it by secret ballot. Remember, if it's publicly available, then Donald Trump and the Trump supporters and the MAGA people can all identify who voted to convict the president. And because this is a political trial outside of the political spectacle that would take place in Congress, they can act accordingly. Okay, they can know that, let's say, Ben Sasse wants to impeach the president, or Mitt Romney wants to impeach or convict the president. He's already been impeached, but they want to convict him, not to remove him from office because he's not in office anymore, but just to sort of send a message and then to preclude him from running again in the future. Well, if the rest of MAGA knows that, if the rest of Trump supporters know that, then they can just primary Ben Sasse or Mitt Romney or whomever of the Republicans will vote to convict Trump, and they might win that, right, during the next election season. Remember, we've got a third of the Senate is up for re-election in 2 years. And so if they vote against Donald Trump and Donald Trump starts a new media platform, starts getting more vocal, gets back involved in politics, all he has to basically do is endorse the candidate who's going to primary those senators, and they may lose their Republican primaries. That may be the end of it. And if they lose that Senate seat, so be it. I think that might be Trump's scorched earth approach these days. So, they're taking all of this into consideration. Now, they would avoid that if they could just pass secret ballots. Nobody would be able to know. I think you'd be a lot more likely to get a conviction if it was done under secret ballot. Here is Emerald Robinson over from Newsmax.
Republican senators to vote to convict the president, that looks pretty unlikely. Like you said, there's the question of the political fallout from it for many. So there has been somewhat of a push behind the scenes in Washington, D.C. by political operatives, not just behind the scenes, but also writing in several outlets and going on television to say that there should be a secret ballot so that Republican senators who might be afraid to publicly vote for conviction could do so behind the scenes. But look, there would still be a fallout, as you said, that'd be like pouring gasoline on the fire. The president has already constructed an enemies list that he plans to go after in 2022. And it's likely that Republican voters would go after these Republican senators and members of Congress despite having a secret ballot in any kind of trial. But the question is on how the trial proceeds and whether there's enough Republican support is really on how motivated Mitch McConnell is to whip a vote and get enough support in the Senate. And that's where it sits. John?
Yeah. Secret ballot, I don't think that would go over well. Not exactly bravery there.
No.
If anyone who's pushing for that, I think people would not be happy with that. Emerald, thanks so much. And we'll see you inside the briefing room at 1 p.m. We're expecting that as well. Hopefully some tougher questions.
Yeah, so it's good points all around from both those people. And I think that it is very, very pertinent to consider the fact that, Republicans would certainly look at a secret ballot as sort of a rotten deal. They would say, all right, so you people can't even put your money where your mouth is. I think people on both sides of the aisle would probably be disgusted by that. I think Democrats would say, oh, so you're not brave enough to just even pick a side. You have to do this all in secret. I know a lot of Republicans would be also very angry about that. So I'm not sure that it's going to go anywhere, this secret ballot stuff, but it is curious. And I think they're right. Donald Trump does have a lot of political power, and there will be some political repercussions for this, which is why I think that it is not such a wise thing to move forward with impeachment just in general. But it's not the Republicans' choice. It's not my choice. It's the Democrats' choice. They're ramming this thing through, and we're going to see where it ends up. Here is the list from the New York Times. The second impeachment trial of former President Donald Trump will deliver its article of impeachment Monday. That was yesterday. At least 17 senators will need to join all 50 Democrats to convict Donald Trump. And so here's where it stands. We've got a handful of undecideds. We've got a slew of no response. And then we've got all no's, where each Republican senator stands. So of the reds, those are all no's. They're not voting to convict Donald Trump. We've got some that haven't responded, and we have some that are undecided. So it looks like nobody is saying yes at this point. Senate leaders made an agreement to pause the trial until the week of February 8th to allow the prosecution and the defense time to write their briefs. Currently, no Republican senators openly support a conviction, and no Democrats have made public statements opposing conviction. So it looks like total 35 support it. Undecided are 28. No's are 27s. And no responses are 10s. That's for the Republicans. I'm sorry, that's for everybody, but the Democrats are 34 and 1. For the independents, undecided are 28, and the no's are 27. So is this going to go anywhere? I really just don't think so. I really don't. I think that this whole thing is just a spectacle at this point in time. The idea that you're going to get 17 Republicans to come out publicly on record and convict Donald Trump for this thing, I think is a big stretch. I think they know. I made a point, 2 points previously. Number one, that it is something that would certainly cause them political turmoil. I think they would get primaried if they voted in favor of conviction, and if they vote against conviction, then they're going to be dealt with in the general. You might see a lot of people who are sort of disgusted with them for not voting to convict Donald Trump. You may see some independents do that, and so they may lose the general election, but they certainly will not be primaried. And I think if you're a senator, you're just sort of weighing the time. You know, how much time can you put between this critical vote and your next election? The people who are in questionable seats or questionable states in 2022, they have a hard question to ask themselves. You know, how are they going to vote? But anybody who's up in 2024 or who just got elected and they're not up until 2026, then they can kind of do whatever they want, because most of the American people are going to forget about it by that point in time. It's not even going to be a consequential vote. So you've got just a very small bucket of senators who are, you know, this is kind of a critical moment for them. But you have to weigh those out. Would you rather sort of spite the primary election, or would you rather gamble on the general election? We're going to have to wait and see. We've got Joe Biden says the impeachment trial, quote, has to happen. So, you know, this was a big question. If Joe Biden was really for unity, if that's what he said, the country needs to heal, it's time to come together. We went through his inaugural address, and it was a lot of that language, a lot of good, hopeful, happy, you know, connection, healing, unity, unity, unity. That was the theme of this entire inauguration, and has really largely been attempting to be the theme for this past couple weeks. And now Biden is out here saying, no, not so much unity for the rest of everybody, but not for Trump or his supporters. He says that the impeachment trial, quote, has to happen, even if it affects his legislative agenda. So he's going all in on it. President Joe Biden says it has to happen, CNN reported. Biden made the remark on the impending impeachment trial to CNN's Caitlin Collins in the White House as the House impeachment managers transmitted the articles of impeachment against Trump. The president acknowledged that the impeachment trial could influence the success of his own legislative agenda, but he told Collins there could be a, quote, a worse effect if it didn't happen. So the president has weighed in on it. You've got Biden, you've got Schumer, you've got Pelosi, and they control the levers of power now, and that is going to be moving full steam ahead, it sounds like. Trump, however, was sending a message to the Senate Republicans ahead of the trial. This is according to Politico. A top political aide to the former president, Trump, spent the weekend quietly reassuring Republican senators that the former president has no plans to start a third party and instead will keep his imprint on the GOP. The message from Brian Jack, Trump's political director at the White House, is the latest sign that Republicans considering an impeachment conviction will do so knowing that Trump may come after them in an upcoming primary if they vote to convict him for, quote, incitement of insurrection. The president wanted me to know, as well as a handful of others, that the president is a Republican. He is not starting a third party, and that anything he would do politically in the future would be as a Republican. The Republican Party is still overwhelmingly supportive of the president, which is a good move, I think, if you are a Republican. And if Donald Trump really does have an idea of running again or wants to do something else in politics, he's got to be he's got to be a Republican, because if he's the Patriot Party, I think the long-term play there is that I think if Trump started a third party, a Patriot Party, then it would start with a lot of fervor. There'd be a lot of energy around that, and a lot of people would want to join that. But you got to remember, I mean, you're dealing with two mega monsters in the form of these two parties, the Republicans and the Democrats. They have an infrastructure that is just so bad and so big and bad. They basically have a monopoly on the entire political vertical. They have everything from, lower level county races all the way up to the presidency and everything in between. You got governors, you've got attorneys generals, everything is within that vertical. And so to have to recreate that from scratch, I think is virtually impossible. Doesn't matter how much money you have, doesn't matter how big of a movement you have. I think it's just very, very difficult. And so Trump has indicated that he is going to be disavowing anything that's linking him to these new parties, the Patriot Party in particular. He says here, according to Business Insider, Donald Trump's campaign is disavowing any affiliation with the Patriot Party, and the former president currently has no plans to break from the Republican Party to pursue a third party, an advisor confirmed. They filed a notice with the FEC, the Federal Election Commission, on Monday that the former president is not associated with the fundraising effort by the Patriot Party, as suggested in a January 22 filing. Trump campaign has no affiliation with the Patriot Party, wanted the notice on record so donors aren't misled about where their contributions are going. Trump has no knowledge of Patriot Party's activities whatsoever, the filing said. So, that's not going to happen. And it's probably a good thing for the Republican Party. Depends on how this goes, right? If they move to convict him, let's say they pass a secret ballot provision and they all vote and Trump's convicted on this thing, I don't know what happens after that. But as it currently stands, Donald Trump has a lot of leverage. As I mentioned previously, he is sort of the kingmaker now of a lot of these Republican candidates. And if they vote to convict him, then he can simply primary them. And you may be saying to yourself, well, that seems like it's a problem, right? Isn't this, this would be like a criminal defendant who has some leverage over the jurors. You've seen this in the movies, right? You have that mob boss and you've got these 12 jurors sitting there on the panel and they're all shivering in their boots because they know that if their name leaks, that mob boss may have somebody go and, pay him a visit. Just give them a little bit of suggestion on how they may want to vote when it comes down to the determination on whether the person is guilty or innocent. Kind of feels like that a little bit. And so many people would say, well, this is undue influence or this is problematic. But remember, we're in a political court. We're not in a criminal court. We're not in a court of law. We're in this political thing that's going on in Congress. And of course, you're dealing in the political arena. You're going to have political consequences and political influences. We're already seeing this. And so if the criticism here is that Donald Trump is exercising undue influence on the senators, potential jurors, the people who are going to vote whether to convict him or not, I understand that. And I can see that argument. But then at the same time, you got to ask yourself, well, wait a minute, the Chief Justice, who is supposed to be delegated by the Constitution to come and hear this trial, is not involved. They're appointing this guy, Senator Leahy, who's 80 years old, who's a Democrat, who's going to vote yes to convict Donald Trump as the judge of the proceedings. So this whole thing is just a sham. It has almost no remnants or no connection to anything that you would see in an actual court of law. It just doesn't make any sense. I mean, even the incitement charge that they claimed in their article of incitement, I don't think would stand up in a real court of law. If they wanted to charge Donald Trump with a crime for that speech, I don't think it meets the standard. Okay, it wasn't a great speech. It wasn't something that was without its flaws, but was it incitement of insurrection by a criminal legal standard? I don't see it at all. And it just goes along with the rest of what we're seeing that Congress is doing. In my opinion, this whole thing is mostly political. It's the Democrats trying to seize on a bad thing that happened at the Capitol on January 6th and trying to milk it for every ounce of political will that they can. And that's just my opinion on it. I'm sure a lot of people have differing opinions about that. Here was Senator Rand Paul today in Congress, says, I'll be speaking on the floor about impeachment. This was pretty fiery today. He says, this impeachment is nothing more than a partisan exercise designed to further divide the country. Democrats claim to want to unify the country, but impeaching a former president, a private citizen, is the antithesis of unity. Democrats brazenly appointing a pro-impeachment Democrat to preside over the trial is not fair or impartial and hardly indicates any kind of unity for the country. No, unity is the opposite of this travesty we're about to witness. If we are about to impeach a president, where is the Chief Justice? If the accused is no longer president, where is the constitutional power to impeach him. Private citizens don't get impeached. Impeachment is for removal from office, and the accused here has already left office. Hyperpartisan Democrats are about to drag our great country down the gutter of rancor and vitriol, the likes of which have never been seen in our nation's history. Instead of doing the nation's work with their new majorities in the House, Senate, and executive branch, they're wasting time on a vendetta against the man no longer in office. Without him as their boogeyman, they might have to legislate and to actually convince Americans that their policy prescriptions are the right ones. I want this body on record. Is this how you think politics should be? In a few minutes, I will insist on a vote to affirm that this proceeding is unconstitutional. And that's why I read all of that. I wanted you to just see where he was going with this. So today, Senator Rand Paul was on the floor of Congress, and he was giving this 10-minute speech. They were all limited to 10 minutes. It was a fiery speech, and it was kind of funny because he was talking about most of the issues that we've already covered here. We've talked a lot about this concept of impeachment. We've talked a lot about this idea that the Democratic standard is so low, it's so minimal, that basically anybody can be impeached under their own standard. And remember, we went through the article of impeachment. It's very, very basic. They essentially took a couple statements out of Trump's speech, in particular saying, if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore. And so what Rand Paul did on his floor speech is he went through a number of different examples from other Democrats and other people throughout the country who have made similar claims. And he was out there saying, if you are a politician and you've ever said the word fight, if you've ever said the word win, if you ever said the word, we have to go out there and deliver, or made a sort of an impassioned speech about what you're doing, what your political movement is about, that's it. You meet the standard. And that's the same thing we've been saying here for like 2 weeks now. And let's listen in on what he has to say. I want to point, it's a 10-minute speech. I'd watch the whole thing if you're interested in Rand Paul, but I wanted to play the clip about Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris, I think is how you say it. Kamala Harris. It's probably going to be 4 years. I'm probably going to get that wrong a number of different times, but I'm going to try my best. Here is Rand Paul talking about Kamala Harris.
Republican has sought to use the government to hold these Democrats responsible for Antifa and Black Lives Matter violence that has consumed our cities all summer, resulting in over $1 billion of destruction, looting, and property damage. Not one Republican said, oh, let's impeach the Democrats who are inciting this, because it would be ridiculous. Many on the Democrat side of the aisle cheered them on. Kamala Harris famously offered to pay the bill for those who are arrested. I wonder if she'll be brought up on charges of inciting violence for that now that she's vice president. Should Kamala Harris be impeached for offering to pay for violent people to get out of jail who've been burning our cities down? No. And no Republican has offered that, because we're not going down the road that Democrats have decided, this low road of impeaching people for political speech.
Well, Rand there, my friend, I'm not so sure I agree with you on that. We all know that they impeached Donald Trump, so I think fair's fair, my friend. And we already drafted the article. You may recall we drafted this on January 13th, impeaching Kamala Harris, Vice President of the United States for high crimes and misdemeanors, resolved. And we got the whole thing drafted. You can download a template. We put the template down in the description below. So, Rand Paul is making a point, but he's not taking it as far as we will. Now, I'm not a senator, and if I were, I would just impeach everybody, but it's probably a good thing I'm not. So we drafted a document literally taking that same argument. We made this 2 weeks ago, and we said, hey, Kamala Harris, after the George Floyd protest, after the unrest that happened in Minneapolis, there was a big mob that came and burned down the third precinct of the Minneapolis Police Department, just set the whole thing on fire, burned the whole thing down right in the middle of this unrest. And so, you had a mob going in there and physically destroying a building that was, the entire purpose of that building was to provide law, right, to their law enforcement, their police officers. And so it's sort of a mob taking out the power structure, which to me sounds like an insurrection just as much as anything that happened on the Capitol Hill day. And what happened? Well, Kamala Harris, the person who was running for the vice presidency at the time, posted on Twitter and said, here is where you can donate money to a secure bail to help people post bond so that they can get out of custody and presumably go back out there and rejoin the restlessness, the unrest that was well underway for the better part of the summer of 2020. And we made the connection. If the Democrats say that Donald Trump's language in his Save America speech was insurrection, then anything that Kamala did was clearly insurrection. So we have that impeachment article still floating around, but Rand Paul then did call for that vote, and it looks like he got some pretty good votes. The Senate just voted on my constitutional point of order. 45 senators agreed that this sham of a trial is unconstitutional. That is more than will be needed to acquit and eventually end this partisan impeachment process. This, quote, trial is dead on arrival in the Senate. So he went on the Senate floor today and said, hey, we're going to vote on whether this thing is even constitutional or not, whether we can impeach a non-president, somebody who's not in office anymore. And 45 senators said, no, it's unconstitutional. We can't move forward with this thing. So of those 45 senators, you would need 12 to sort of, so 5 plus 12 would be 17. So it looks like 5 senators that are Republicans didn't vote. So presumably they're maybes on whether to convict Trump or not, or they voted that it is constitutional. So they're definitely maybes on whether or not to convict Trump. But you would need to pull 12 people of the 45 to flip. And they've already voted that it's unconstitutional. So how could they switch their votes now and then vote to convict him? It's logically inconsistent, and they just wouldn't do it. So as I think this is a pretty good indicator that this whole thing is not going to go anywhere, which we all knew anyways. But they're going to continue to milk this thing for what they can. All right, let's change gears a little bit. Let's talk about, speaking of that unrest, speaking about Minneapolis and burning down police precincts, how about Portland? Because that's where Mayor Ted Wheeler has been dealing with this stuff for a very long period of time. I think in Portland, was that where Chaz was? Was that in Seattle? Chaz or Chop or one of these other sort of makeshift countries that they just seized from power that's been taking place in the upper Northwest for months now. I mean, as long as I can remember that we've been doing the show, we've been talking about it. And it's been Antifa and BLM just running wild out there. And at one point in time, even Ted Wheeler was out there joining in the crowd. You remember that? We talked about this on this channel months ago. And he was out there sort of bumbling around with the crowd. And the crowd's like, hey, we don't care who you are. We don't care if you're the mayor. We are like anti-establishment. And so Ted Cruz was getting sort of ping pong balled or a pinball machined around in that group of the Antifa people. And then he had to sort of skedaddle on out of there, trying to go and make peace with them. But they don't want peace. They want the end of whatever they want. End of fascism, I guess, is their argument. But Ted Wheeler now is sort of backtracking a little bit and saying, oh, okay, now it's time to end this stuff. Of course, after the election, they make all those changes. And he's now being a little bit more vocal, saying, okay, now it's time to return law and order. Now we want a little bit more peace. But very recently, he was involved he's in a police report. So let's take a look at what happened. This is from the Portland Police Bureau public record release. Looks like this all happened just 2 days ago on January 24th at this location over in Portland. So on January 24th at about, 11 a.m. No, 9 at night. It looks like 9 at night. Military time is brutal on me. I'm terrible with numbers, but it says here it's open, it's under investigation, and the offense here is COVID-19 related. So don't you just love that? We have a whole new category of crimes now that are all related to COVID. If you are not already understanding about how overcriminalized our society is, we just added a whole category of new offenses right on top of all of this. And it's sort of developing as we speak. Criminal code, I think, is sort of responding to how to deal with these COVID-related incidents. And we see that took place at a restaurant over in Portland. And we see Sam Adams was, I think, the person who was there with Ted Wheeler. Person number 1 is the reporting party, Ted Wheeler, Ted Tevis Wheeler, age 58. And it looks like he's employed by the city of Portland. The occupation down here is the mayor. And this was reported by an officer, Peter Simpson. And it says here, January 24th, 9 p.m., received a call from Robert King, the senior policy advisor on public safety for Mayor Ted Wheeler. King told me Wheeler was involved in an incident at a Southwest Portland restaurant in which Wheeler used pepper spray against an unknown person. King told me Wheeler was with former Portland Mayor Sam Adams, which is a beer, at the time of the incident. He asked that I call Wheeler to get a statement regarding the incident. Wheeler called me shortly after and relayed the following statement to me, which he also emailed. At approximately 8 p.m., I was leaving Hillsdale McKinnon's pub. I was confronted by a middle-aged white male, appeared to be videoing with a cell phone, indicated that he had been photographing me while I was inside the restaurant's tent, accused me of sitting in the restaurant without a mask. In fact, I was in the tented area of the restaurant sitting at a table, and I informed him the current COVID regulations allow people to take their mask off for the purpose of eating and drinking, then accused me of other things, which I indicated he did not. I understand the rules and should probably have a better understanding who's going to confront people about them. He said I did not understand the rules and should probably have a better understanding. Followed me to my car, continuing the video. I attempted to get closer to my car and get into it. He came closer. He had no face mask on and got within a foot or two of my face while he was videoing me. I became imminently concerned for my personal safety, and as I had been physically accosted in a similar situation. In addition, I was concerned about contracting COVID, given that he was right in my face and he was not wearing a face mask. I believe I had taken my mask off as I attempted to enter the car, but I don't specifically remember. I clearly informed him that he needed to back off. He did not, so I informed him that I was carrying pepper spray and that I would use it if he did not back off. He remained at my close distance. I pulled out my pepper spray and I sprayed him in the eyes. He seemed surprised and backed off. He made a comment like, "I can't believe you just pepper sprayed me." He walked away from my car. The individual with me suggested that I leave for my safety. Before I did so, I threw a full water bottle towards him so that he could wash his eyes out with water. I left the scene. Immediately thereafter, I notified my chief of staff and deputy chief of staff of the situation. So people are just killing each other over these masks. It's ridiculous. I do not condone harassing, public figures. I don't condone harassing anybody over this stuff. I don't know why people feel the need to go up there and scream at people about masks. Either side, whatever side you're on. If somebody's not wearing a mask, I've seen people in grocery stores just go hysterical. "You're killing everybody right now. You're killing me." Going, wait a minute, what? He's like 30 feet away from you. What's your problem? And conversely, you've got this guy who's now trying to, point out, I would say, governmental bureaucratic hypocrisy. And now he's getting very aggressive about it. So both sides are just very angry over the masks. And it's probably going to be that way for a long period of time. And although I do not like, harassing public figures, I would never endorse that. I certainly like calling out hypocrisy when we can see it, especially amongst the people who are, virtue signaling every single time they can about masks, about following the rules. We gave Joe Biden a hard time about it. We give everybody a hard time about it when they set a standard and then they fall below their own standard while expecting everybody else to abide by that same standard. It's just the epitome of hypocrisy and double standards, and it drives me bananas when our public figures do it. So let's take a look at what this officer reported. Says, "I asked Wheeler if he recognized the man from any previous encounters. He told me he did not. He described the man as a white male, 40s, shorter than 6 foot tall, medium build, dark colored, on and on." Says, Sam Adams was present. I asked Wheeler if he saw anyone else around the area. He said there may have been a family, but not sure. I asked Wheeler anything else to add. He did not. I confirmed he had a phone number for Adams. I called Adams to get a statement. Adams told me Wheeler left the restaurant out a side door to the parking lot and saw the unknown male waiting outside the door as they left. Told me the man was filming them with a cell phone, made statements about them not wearing masks. Also explained to the man that rules allowed for removal of masks for eating while drinking, but you weren't 6 feet apart, the guy says. Adams told me that the man said something about having pictures. Also walked to his car. The man kept following. Wheeler opened his door, not gotten inside, said the man was very close to Wheeler. He heard Wheeler warn about the pepper spray. The man did not back up. After being pepper sprayed, he was talking to his own camera about being pepper sprayed for, quote, no reason. Adams told me that he stated to the man, quote, "Actually, you were really close." Adams told me that the man walked back towards the restaurant and Wheeler tossed him a water bottle. They both left the area. I asked him if he saw him prior to leaving the parking lot. He said, no, I didn't notice him. If he saw anyone else inside, he said, no, I did not recognize him. He describes the man a little bit differently, so considerably shorter. So mid to late 40s, 5'4" to 5'5". Wheeler said, no, he's about 6 foot tall. So that's a pretty big difference. Normally I don't make much grief about that, but somebody who's 5'4" is very different than somebody who is shorter than 6 feet tall or even close to 6 feet tall. So pretty big gap there, but not a huge issue. I think they both could probably recognize the guy if they found him. Adams told me he attempted to video record the incident, but recorded only the audio instead, which he sent me. I listened to the recording, which was 1 minute and 31 seconds long, could hear a male voice talking to Wheeler and Adams. In summary, the parts of the audible are consistent with the above statements, the recording will be submitted as evidence. I contacted the Bureau of Emergency Communications to determine if any calls were received from the restaurant. I called Hillsdale Brewery to determine if any employees had any information, and they were already closed for the night. And then I checked Twitter to see if there were any recent postings about Wheeler and Pepper, and did not locate anything. As of this writing, the identity of the man involved in the incident is not known. So smart police work. They were presuming that the guy was recording so that he could, blast this all over the media and say, hey, look at what a hypocrite Ted Wheeler is. And so the first thing he did is went onto Twitter, looked up Wheeler, looked up Pepper, looked up, probably a couple other things, Mask maybe would be a good word to search for. Didn't find anything. So this individual didn't post anything. And it looks like the investigation is probably going to end there. Let's listen to the audio. We got a little bit of that. It's very, very hard to hear. So let's tease through it just a quick second.
You weren't 6 feet apart from Mr. Adams over there.
Yeah, we were.
Are you saying that I don't have it? I'm saying that you don't know the rules.
No, we were 6 feet apart.
You weren't 6 feet apart. I got a picture of you. You guys are a bunch of hypocrites, right?
No, we were 6 feet apart. We were eating and drinking.
Yeah.
All right, see you, Mayor.
Hey, thanks for ruining our decision, man.
You are 1 foot away from me. You're not 6 feet away.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Wow. All right, Mayor, get on the road.
Take care, Sam. Wow.
Get on the road.
You just pepper sprayed me for no reason at all.
Actually, I was here, and you were like a foot from him. He asked you to back away, and you didn't.
Wow. Oh, you screw that. Oh my goodness. I can't see, but the air has just thrown something at me. And it hit my knee.
Yeah, so a little bit hard to hear. It was not as aggressive as I would have guessed just from reading the report. It sounded like this was, very, very kind of in your face and very, very aggressive. And I just didn't hear that. It sounded, the guy who got pepper sprayed near the end of that was just saying, wow, you pepper sprayed me. Wow, that's okay. That's a lot, but all right. The mayor just threw me something. Kind of talking in that tone and that cadence. There's another local newspaper called Willamette Week. Aaron Mesh over there did a transcript of what was being said in that audio. It's an unknown man confronts them both at a restaurant, says, "Excuse me," Wheeler says, "apparently you don't know the rules." He says 2 people can dine together if they are 6 feet apart. Quote, "You weren't 6 feet apart from Mr. Adams over there," the man replies. "Yeah, we were," interjects Adams. The audio is then interrupted with rustling noises, apparently because Adams is walking. The last thing the man says before Wheeler deploys pepper spray appears to be, "Thanks for ruining our city," although the last word is garbled. Quote, "You just pepper sprayed me," the man says. "You are 1 foot away from me," Wheeler replies. "You are not 6 feet away." "Oh my God," the man says, seemingly reacted to the spray. "Wow." Adams suggests Wheeler leave. Quote, "All right, Mr. Mayor, get on the road." So there you go. Stupid. The whole thing is just stupid. Law enforcement involved. We've got citizens involved. We've got the mayor. We've got an ex-mayor. Everybody's at each other's throats over masks and social distance rules. It's ridiculous. Okay, but the guy has a point. The guy is ruining their town. So certainly it is a reason to be mad. All right, let's take a look at another bad Popo. So we just went through a bad mayor. Let's go through a bad Popo, and then we're going to get into the super chat. This one is another mask issue. More people just going bananas over the masks. This is from police threatening a man in Texas for not wearing a mask. Watch how quickly and heated this body camera footage is, how bad and quickly it gets bad. We've got Nicholas Connolly posted this over on Twitter, so go check him out as well. Here it is.
Where's your mask at?
What mask?
The mask that you're required to wear by city ordinance.
I don't have one.
So that wasn't very polite. The officer just walks in. "Hey, where's your mask at?" Guy says, "What?" Let's go back.
You need to step outside till you can get one. City ordinance, sir. You not see the sign?
Like your mask is really working.
It's still a city ordinance. Leave the property or you get a citation, period. Don't argue with me. It's real simple.
You know what the
It's real.
governor's order
I don't
is?
care what the governor order is. It is a city
Oh, wait a
ordinance
minute.
to step
Did we
outside.
just take the mask off?
No, I pulled it up because it was
No, you
slipping.
it was exposed.
Dispatch, start me another unit. I'm going to have to detain one. Put your hands right here.
No.
All right, real quick on this. So if you'll notice, the guy was already leaving, walking out. Okay, so the cop comes in and says, "Hey, put your mask on." And I think he said if you don't have one, you got to step outside. So the guy was already walking outside. Basically, this whole thing has been 2 seconds, 5 seconds maybe. Let's go back to the video.
I'm not going to be detained.
Yes, you are. I will tase you right now. You are in violation, and I gave you a lawful order. You have a weapon. Put your hands up now.
Here.
Dispatch, he's armed. Have the unit step it up. I've got him at taser point. Get your hand up now. Dude, you're just dumb. You should be listening. Don't move. You move again, I'm going to drop you.
3325 Robinson.
It was simple. All you had to do was step outside and put a mask on.
Now listen to this.
Dispatch, I've got him disarmed, still uncooperative.
All right, so did you hear what he said right there? So I want to pause right there. The video's mostly over. He says, dispatch, I've got him disarmed. He's still uncooperative. The guy is standing there following every single order with his hands on his head. The cop just said he's still uncooperative.
1047. Coming up to the circle.
All right, so there you go. America's heroes out there just making sure everybody has their mask on. The guy had about 10 seconds to get into an argument. He walks in, put your mask on. Cop was kind of a prick about it. Guy says, "What are you talking about?" He says, "So you're like your mask is really working?" Rah! How dare you challenge my authority? And he's instantly going to tase him. The guy was already walking outside. As soon as he gets outside, then the cop draws the taser on him and then disarms him, which is fine. I think that's standard protocol. But once they do that, he calls on dispatch. I've got him disarmed now. He's still being uncooperative. Literally, as the guy is standing like that with his hands behind his head, facing away from the officer, he's just been disarmed, not even communicating anymore. So this guy is probably, going to be charged with a crime for this whole stupid ordeal from these dumb mask mandates. Drives me absolutely bananas. The situation could have been dealt with about 1,000,000 times differently, but it doesn't compute for many of these cops. They just look at a situation. Anytime you challenge their authority, it's instant psycho mode. They got to pull out their taser. They got to, get into an altercation with this guy. And it could have been dealt with in a much, I would say, more productive manner. But that's the world that we're living in here, folks. Isn't it just grand? Let's jump into the super chats. Our first one comes from White Buffalo 84. We have White Buffalo 84 says unions are having buyer's remorse after Keystone. Yeah, I think so. I saw a couple headlines. I saw some people are posting before and afters. There was one union that said, sometime back, like I think in late 2020, that they were endorsing Biden and Harris. They had this big long statement. Same union. Same website, same logo, same organization. Now says, their new press release is, hey, we're going to lose thousands of jobs. Thanks. So, yeah, a little bit of buyer's remorse. We have another one from Chris Wolney. Says, any updates regarding the Capitol Hill lax security on 1/6? So I have not seen anything. I think that they're still investigating at this point in time. Oh my gosh, I'm blanking right now. But I just saw an article. What was that? I don't have anything ready right now for you, Chris. I'm trying to dig, but it's not popping up. But yeah, I am very, very interested in that. I would love to get to the bottom of what happened. I think that there were some pretty critical security failures. We've already talked about Mayor Bowser. We've talked about the Sergeant of Arms from both from both houses of Congress, the Senate and the House, who basically said they didn't want to impose any new requests on law enforcement or the National Guard because of bad optics. And it's just been sort of a snowball of just bad decisions that one right after the other. And I would love to get to the bottom of it. I'm not sure that we're ever going to, but I am constantly looking out for those stories. So this is a good request. If anybody sees anything like that, please send that over to us at tips@rrlawaz.com. Some of this stuff gets obscure, and we may have an answer. Somebody will resign or something will happen 3 months down the road, and I just will miss it because we moved on to other things. But I would really, really like to know what happened on that particular day. I would like to see a deep investigation. So if anybody sees anything, please send it my way. We have, oh my goodness, look who it is. It's Dr. EMB in the house. Hey, Doc. She sent over a very, very nice, generous super chat of a pear with what looks like a popsicle and a piece of cheese just ransacking through that poor town. But I appreciate it, Doctor. Good to see you again. Haven't seen you in a while. Thanks for popping on by again. We have Wolfgang Deo in the house, says, from office of a non-president. Wishing all well, a secret vote on impeachment will yield to primaries of those Republicans that historically didn't like Trump. It's a good point, Wolfgang, right? If we see this secret ballot and there's suddenly 18, 19 Republicans who go in and vote to convict Donald Trump, first of all, that's the end of the Republican Party as far as I can tell. I think it's mostly on the ropes anyways, but that would be confirmatory, be basically dead at that point in time, because I think Donald Trump would just say, okay, well, I don't know who did it, so we're just going to primary all of you people. And I think a lot of Republicans would be very, very angry about that, and I think they would probably be successful in their primaries. So the secret ballot can only go so far. I think it's still going to be something that is not secret. I think it's going to be public, and I do not think he's going to be convicted. We have Beth Coddington says, salutations, Robert and friends. Ah, shucks. You're all pretty dang cool yourself. Yeah, Beth. Thanks, Beth. Beth just joined us over on Locals, and I think that's what she's talking about. Pretty cool people over there. So go check it out. We've got, oh my goodness, we've got Jamal Boussanet in the house, our very, very famous French super chatter. In the house, Jamal Boussanet says GME to the moon, which is sponsored by Reddit Wall Street Bets. So GME, I believe, is the stock symbol for GameStop. Could be wrong on that, but a very interesting article that a bunch of Redditors were just buying or doing something with stocks. I don't really understand much about that stuff, but they were doing something and they were sort of inflating the value of GameStop and buying some options. I think some guy turned like 50 grand into like $11 million just by inflating the stocks and sort of doing shenanigans over there. And so Jamal Boussanet, it sounds like he's along for the ride. Good to see you, Jamal. We have, we've got two very nice super chats coming over from Zaloarge. I've seen the video. The FBI agent is lying in the affidavit. Really? In the video, you can clearly hear that it is not Straka, the one screaming, take it from him. The FBI agent is lying. Wow. Okay. So there you go. It's not him screaming, take it from him. So the FBI agent is lying, which is outstanding that somebody watched the full video, because I did not see it. It wasn't in the affidavit. I have not seen it provided anywhere. Presumably that's going to be a part of formal discovery. So Brandon Straka and his defense attorney should get all of that, right? If he does not already have a copy of that video. But any evidence that the government has will certainly be turned over to his defense team. I'm presuming that he's got a lawyer or will be getting a lawyer very soon. And that attorney will then be able to just go down line by line by line by line and rebut every single one of those allegations. And if that is the case, if this FBI agent is lying, or let's just say, sort of fabricating the truth on this, then there are ramifications for that. You can go back and you could say that there basically was no probable cause to come up with the arrest warrant or to even file the complaint. And so you can have a probable cause determination hearings further down the line, and all those little finer points can be dealt with in the court of law. So I would very much encourage Brandon to get a very good lawyer. We have another one from Beth in the house. Robert, today I got a survey from Judicial Watch in D.C. It came through USPS. It's supposedly a watchdog organization. Of course, they wanted a donation. Have you ever heard of them? Thank you, kind sir. Thank you, Beth. Well, thanks for asking me about that. So I know of Judicial Watch. I don't know much about them. I know that's Tom Fitton over there. I think he's got, I think he does good work. I think he does a lot of Freedom of Information Act requests. He does a lot of, He does a lot, actually, now that I think about it. It's not all coming to my mind, but I think if there's an organization to support, I think Judicial Watch is probably a pretty good one. Go check him out on Twitter. It's, Judicial Watch is on Twitter, and then Tom Fitton is the guy's name. And he's got some pretty nice little, some biceps on him, which is, of course, always a good thing. So go check out Judicial Watch. And I think, Beth, yeah, you could do worse than being involved with Judicial Watch. But, I don't know if I would donate anything through the U.S. Postal Service. If you want to support them, I think I'd go find their homepage, their website, and connect with them that way. We have Seiji Takahara. Is it a First Amendment violation that there are laws being used on a person that is merely in the area of a crime and is reacting to it verbally? Okay, so you must be talking about the Brandon case. So under the U.S. Code, it looks like that's how they're trying to classify this, because he was participating in the disruption of a formal governmental proceeding. So when we're talking about free speech, many people think that it's just totally free. Like you're allowed to just go out there and say whatever you want. That's not the case. There are pretty significant limitations on free speech. And some of them I think are, actually most of them I think are pretty well justified. But when it comes to sort of protesting, there are certain things called time, manner, and place restrictions. So you can't just go out and protest wherever you want, whenever you want, saying whatever you want. You don't want people on your street corner at 2 a.m. saying, death to taxes or whatever. You don't want to allow that to happen. So our courts and our system of law have said, no, we can put certain limitations on free speech. And time is one of those things. You can't just go out there at 2 a.m. The manner, the way that you're communicating, you can't use, let's say, laser pointers or flashing lights or big, loud horns and sirens at certain locations. And then the location, of course, they set up these sort of free speech zones that you are allowed to protest in. And, most of that stuff I think is pretty well established law, and it functions pretty well. I don't have a lot of issues with most of that. But if Brandon Straka was there and he was in a questionable area, he was in a zone where maybe some of those things didn't apply, I think you can make some good First Amendment arguments that him just saying something was not enough to cross that line of criminality. But we would definitely need to dive more. You have to really dive into that. And what we just saw from that FBI agent, that is not the case. Okay, that's just a very preliminary statement. That's a probable cause statement. It's an arrest warrant statement. You need a judge to sign off on it so that you can go conduct the arrest. But that's not the case. Okay, there's probably a lot more evidence that they have gathered in order to turn that over to a U.S. attorney who will then be prosecuting it. Then there'll be a whole series of negotiations that take place about, how the result can be reached, what kind of agreement would satisfy all the parties. We have Chris Wolney says, former FBI Mike German, now ACLU and NYU law, quote, FBI was manufacturing terrorism cases after 9/11. History to repeat for conservatives or tinfoil hat? I definitely don't think it's a tinfoil hat there, Chris. I think you're already seeing the framework that is being laid in place to criminalize a lot of domestic issues and domestic speech and domestic associations. We've talked about this previously. We talked about, we saw... When was this? A weekend ago? I think I posted this on Locals also. I wrote out a little statement. I posted it on Twitter. But my thought process here was, we were talking about yesterday the Andrew Sullivan piece where he was comparing two concepts, racial equity and racial equality. And the idea here was that they're using language that is very similar to language that America's already familiar with. Okay, we already know what racial equality is. So if you just kind of get rid of that L and you call it racial equity, well, maybe we'll just gobble that up too, even though it means something entirely different. Well, the same type of language changes I've been noticing are also coming out of Jen Psaki, who is the new press secretary for the Biden administration. And she was saying they were using this new phrase called domestic violence or domestic violent extremism. And that was a term that I just had not heard before. I've heard of domestic extremism. I've heard of, domestic terrorism. I've heard of homegrown radicals and things like that, but never domestic violence terrorism. And so my mind was, my thought process went to the idea that, okay, well, we already know what domestic violence is, right? Just go into Google, type in domestic violence. You're going to see women's shelters and how to survive this stuff. And it's already well ingrained into our system of law. We already know how it works. And one of the ways that domestic violence works is that if you're charged with domestic violence, you're not even incriminated yet. You haven't been convicted or pled guilty to anything. But in Arizona and many other parts of the country, as soon as you're charged with domestic violence, not found guilty, just charged and arrested, oftentimes one of the release conditions is you can't possess a firearm anymore until you have the final disposition of the case. Automatic, right? Because it's a domestic situation and they're afraid that you're going to, go shoot your spouse or whatever. So they just automatically remove that ability from you, which is troubling. Now, if they're going to say that it's domestic violence extremism, if they're going to use maybe that framework of the domestic violence law that is already in place and then just attach that now to extremism, they're sort of carrying over one area of law and just dumping it in another area using the same tools that Americans have already grown accustomed to and just translate that over to a new issue. I think it's very concerning. Yeah, I think it's troubling language. I don't like the idea that they're going to be lumping. We saw John Brennan, who is a former CIA, saying that libertarians are part of extremist groups. I mean, essentially anybody who is oppositional to the government or to the mega structure that exists out there is now an extremist. I mean, libertarians? Folks, like, that's how I identify. That's the closest party that I would identify with, is a libertarian. Am I an extremist? Are they going to start tapping my cell phone and, and doing whatever else they want to do with that, removing firearms and all that stuff? That's scary as hell. So I do not think it's tinfoil hat at all there, Chris. We have Kenneth Slayer. Why should I give up a representative that represents me in my home because someone on the other side of the nation does not like what represents me? Why should I give up a representative that represents me in my home because someone on the other side of the nation does not like what represents me? I don't think you should. Yeah, I don't think you should. That's the whole point of representative government, right? Each individual locale gets their own representation, and it's proportional representation to the population. So I don't think you should, Kenneth. Not even a little bit. We have another one from Gertjan Decker. Says the Act of 1871, the quote, United States is a corporation. Is this true? If yes, the fences make sense in combination with Executive Order 13848. See you soon. So I don't know what that executive order is. 13848. I just don't know what that is off the top of my head because there are a lot of executive orders. Biden signed a lot of them lately. Is the U.S. a corporation? I don't know about that. I don't know what you're asking about that. The Act of 1871, does that make the United States incorporated like a company? I don't think they're traded on the stock exchange. We have Brian Hack says, I think term limits is the solution you want. Investigate for fraud. Also, stop term limiting your own representative by vote. Save old faces. We have look, I happen to love old people, okay? I sort of look at old people with a lot of reverence. All of them. They've lived long lives. They're great. A lot of life experience, a lot of wisdom. They don't tolerate a lot of BS from a lot of people, which I like. I can relate to that, okay? Pretty amazing. Should they be in Congress running and passing laws for a country that is not 80 years old? Probably not. Okay, we've seen how this works. My main issue with these very, very old people is they don't know anything about the new world, essentially, this new technological world that we're living in. Every time I've seen these old Congress people haul in Mark Zuckerberg and Jack Dorsey and the Google people and on and on and on, they don't even know what they're talking about. They're speaking two different languages. They're literally living in two different worlds. One's living in sort of modern America. These other people are living like back in the 1970s where they were faxing their documents to each other. And so they'll ask them questions about, are you censoring data? And they'll give this big, long, convoluted answer about algorithms and about the impossibility of having human interference and on and on and on. And the senators just go, so what you're saying is, and they go, Senator, no, that's not what I'm saying. Yes, Senator, yes. No, there's no censorship. No, we're transparent. Yes, it's all good. And they just have no idea what's going on. That's not how we want this country to be governed, in one man's opinion. We have Lumiere Donnerschlag, heck of a name, says, why isn't America up in arms? Most of us are lazy and bored and want others to take care of us. It's not lack of education or care, just Occam's razor. Yeah, I mean, look, I'm glad that America's not up in arms. I don't want violence. I don't want a civil war. I don't want people out there killing each other. That's awful. That's horrible. Don't want that at all. So if it's, people are lazy and bored versus taking up arms and, ransacking the headquarters of some political party, I'll take the laziness over that. But I certainly would encourage people to learn more about this stuff. If this stuff angers you and your only solution is to kind of just sit there and not do anything about it, I don't know how productive that is. So I think there are better, more productive ways to voice your displeasure with how this country is being run, where it's going. But certainly violence is not one of them. And I think a lot of people are being woken up just a little bit. I think COVID has shaken a lot of people out of their stupor. I think a lot of what they're seeing happen to their children not going to school, what people are seeing happening to their businesses, to their friends, their family, seeing how our government can even manage the healthcare. I mean, not the finest moment for the bureaucracy. And I think people are seeing that. That's not a bad thing. People are starting to take a little bit more personal responsibility, I think, and I'm hopeful anyways. I'm hopeful that a lot of people who once placed their trust in this all-powerful federal government realize that's not the answer anymore. The federal government is not going to save you. They don't care about you. They are just a big, giant bureaucracy that serves the bureaucracy. And the more and more we see these $2.4 trillion bills being crammed down our throats, the more and more we see everybody who was investigated for selling stock, they just get away with a little slap on the wrist, not even a big deal. Don't worry about it. It's a joke in the oligarchy of our U.S. government. And I think people are starting to realize that. I'm hopeful at least, but who knows. We have Kate XA to do says a Twitter impeachment trending, conservative votes silenced, and there is no one for the left to vomit their orange man bad rhetoric all over anymore, so it's gotten boring. Twitter is pretty boring. It's a good point, Katie. I think that that Twitter has lost a little bit of its flair, a little bit of its fervor has just kind of gone out the window. And I think that's probably why they need to go through with this impeachment stuff. I mean, if Donald Trump is not in the news, it's extremely boring. Last week I was pretty hard on Biden, but I was poking around a lot of the news articles and the news websites today, and I'm just thinking, it's pretty bland. And for some people, that's a nice vacation. They're very happy about it. I like a little bit more energy in leadership than what we are currently seeing, but I will grant you that it's boring, and sometimes that's not such a bad thing either. We have Tara Rayner says Trump should demand communication between Pelosi and anyone she spoke to regarding security resources. They were warned and had a skeleton crew. Yeah, there was a lot of warning. I mean, many people were bringing this up, but Mayor Bowser refused that. Refused any help. The sergeant of arms for both houses refused it. We know that the former chief of police, I think with the Capitol Hill police, resigned, and he came out and said, hey, I was warning everybody. So why was that? Why was this so underprepared? I mean, everybody for months has been saying what a bunch of white supremacist and racist that the Donald Trump people are. It came up at the debate. Even Joe Biden was asking Donald Trump to disavow the Proud Boys. Remember, stand down and stand by. So they all knew, allegedly, that this was a big, huge problem, and they were underprepared for it. Why is that? Did it serve anybody's purpose? Was it helpful to the GOP to have all of this just sort of derailed? Was it helpful to the Democrats to have this derailed? A lot of people are really picking up on this issue, and they're using it to cram through a lot of legislation that otherwise could not be talked about. Okay, you wouldn't be able to talk about domestic extremism if we didn't have the Capitol Hill riots. So you just have to kind of connect it back. Who benefited from this? Well, the establishment did. Trump supporters didn't. Donald Trump didn't. They got hit hard. Some of them deserve it. Some of them absolutely do not deserve it. Some of them had nothing to do with it. Good, honest people who would never think about doing anything like that. But they're lumped into this bucket. They're lumped into this group of extremists as a result of what happened. And so me being hyper cynical, I'm extremely cynical, as you can probably tell. I don't take their standard explanation at face value. We have another one over on Locals. So this is what Locals looks like. If you leave a comment in our live show thread, Miss Faith is going to add it to the slides. Faith, is it a First Amendment violation? Wait. Okay, so I already read the first part of this, Takahara. We've got, seems that there was an illegality that was conducted. Yes, however, there was a peaceful assembly around it as well as reactionary speech that may be amplified by the shock of illegality having occurred. So yeah, Seji, I think I sort of answered that. I think that there are permissible and impermissible ways to use free speech in this country. And the real question is going to be, in particular for the individual that we were talking about, what's his name? Straka. For Straka is whether or not he sort of, crossed that line. And so you can be charged with a crime for, inciting or encouraging people or participating. And according to the U.S. Code, especially if you're interfering or interrupting an act of Congress. But, you'd have to really go through that statute in fine detail. So, the way that I would approach this is I would go through and I would just come up with I'd make a list of every single act that they're alleging Brandon Straka did. I'd also look at the U.S. Code for every single violation. They have all this. I didn't do this today, but every single subsection, ED52. All right, what does that say? Boom, okay. And you just compare and contrast the two. And you say, all right, well, this one fits, this one doesn't, this one fits, this one doesn't. And it's pretty rudimentary analysis. Now you can go very deep on those for every single different statute that you find. There's just volumes of case law. So you would go through and you'd say, all right, when this person was charged with this offense, here were the facts of that case. Here were the facts of this case. Here were the facts of that case. This one was, this guy was, shouting a bullhorn inside the building in the congressperson's face, and they charged him with that. Okay, well, how does that differ from Brandon Straka's case? Over here, he wasn't even in the building. Okay, he was around a group of 1,000 other people, and they were all shouting. So how could you say that he was the one responsible for the ultimate interference with the congressional property and not that guy over there? So you sort of dilute the culpability across a number of different individuals, and you make it difficult for them to point out that it was him specifically. We had a commenter here talk about the idea that, no, he never said that. That was somebody else in the video. So now his speech is no longer in question, or it's questionable. Can you raise doubt about what he actually said, what he intended? And I mean, you could have a field day with a case like this. So I think they will, right? Brandon is somebody with a high profile. I would guess that he's going to have a team of people who want to help him on this case. We have another one from Wolfgang Hack. It says, do you think Republicans could distract Democrats from the federal minimum wage with UBI? Like, imagine a universal minus $1,000 UBI, it would cause work. Now, a plus $1,000 UBI. So I don't really know where you're going with this question there, Wolfgang Hack. Is this different than Wolfgang Deo? Wolfgang, did you change your name? I'm confused. So I don't think that Republicans want either one of those things. I don't think they want a federal minimum wage or UBI. So I don't know how they would play with those cards. I think they're no's across the board on that stuff. We have Seiji Takahara. I think the secret ballot, though, would help alleviate the partisan pressures and help stimulate, not inciting insurrection, fruitful debate. So stimulate fruitful debate is positive. You do not want to incite insurrection. But I don't know about that. I mean, what if the debate is contentious? Somebody's going to get mad. If somebody says something a little bit hot, I think that's enough. The secret ballot, though, to answer your question, yeah, I mean, I think the idea here is that it does alleviate some of that partisan pressure. It gives the senators a bunch of cover. Nobody's going to know how they voted, so they can go and vote their true feelings. But we live in a representative democracy. We want to know how our people are voting. That's kind of the whole point of the show. Okay, we don't want people. We want them to do the will of the people. And if they're voting in secret, we'll never know what that is. We have MJ says, is a private vote even constitutional? Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know the answer to that. You'd probably have to look at the Senate history. I think it is constitutional. Yeah, I think they can do that. I think it's been used several times in the past, actually. So I think they're allowed to vote in secret. Actually, I think they did it recently. Didn't they just do it recently? I think we talked about it on the show. I can't remember what we were talking about, but yeah, they voted. So they vote by, I think it's called like an oral vote. So they just kind of say it. And if it's in a closed session, nobody knows. I think that just happened, actually. So, yeah, I do believe it's constitutional. Sammy Elliott says, Trump will stay with the GOP. People keep forgetting he still runs the party and still has power within the GOP. The impeachment is another waste of cash. Yeah, I agree. I think it's another waste. Ultimately, I think it's going to backfire a bit. I'm not real sure that the American people are going to want to tolerate much more of it. I think largely people have moved on. I think one of the biggest strategic strokes of brilliance from Mitch McConnell was pushing this thing back as far as he could. So if they're going to push it back to February 8th, that's like 3 weeks away. That's a month away, right? February 8th was a month away from what happened on January 6th. I think that the more time that you put and the more time and distance you put between the bad act and the trial on the act, it's not necessarily a bad thing. because people get a little bit, the jets cool down a little bit. Everybody just relaxes. If they would have, really what happened, Capitol Hill riots were on January 6th. Shortly thereafter, on the 13th, that's when Donald Trump was impeached. 7 days later, boom, impeached. People were still furious about it. That's why they got it just done immediately. Snap impeachment, according to Jonathan Turley. And now we're saying we're a month out. People are kind of over it. People have moved on to the next story. It's now Joe Biden's turn. Now he's the guy in charge. Donald Trump isn't around anymore. Keeping a low profile. You haven't heard much from him. He's not on Twitter. You don't even see him. So by the time we get to February 8th, he's just kind of an afterthought. So now we're going to reopen that can of worms. I mean, isn't the country really happy now? 80 million people are thrilled that he's not in office anymore. They want to go back and relitigate an old case with Donald Trump to remove him from office when he's not in office anymore. I don't think it's going to look good. I think it's a mistake for the Democrats. And I mean that sincerely. I mean, I think if the Democrats wanted to win on this issue, I think that they would. Joe Biden has already, I think, missed the mark on it. But Joe Biden would have come out and said, listen, America, what happened was very wrong. I hold Donald Trump personally responsible for it. Okay, you're entitled to do that, Joe. But we're not going to move forward on this impeachment stuff. It's time to heal. We're going to move the country forward. We're not looking backwards anymore. We're looking forwards. That would have been a powerful statement. And I mean, honestly, I would have had to sit here and go, it's pretty good. But what it looks like now is just massive hypocrisy. He is somebody out there claiming for unity and healing and moving on, but then he's doubling down on looking backwards and grinding through this impeachment. I think it's just a wasted opportunity for his administration, and they're probably going to pay the price for it. Wolfgang Deo says, I am surprised. I still haven't been banned off Facebook. By the way, I think Rob has a little firebrand Trump inside him. Future cast for Q returns. Look, sometimes I get a little bit heated on the Trump stuff. I know a lot of people are critical of that. I know we've gotten some comments, gotten some feedback that, hey, maybe ease off it a little bit. I think the reason I like Donald Trump, or the reason I like to talk about these issues, is because the double standards here are just so glaring. It's just easy to talk about. And it's just kind of like shooting fish in a barrel. But I'm not a Q person. All right there, Wolfgang, take it easy. Wolfgang says, I agree with Rand. He's just being the messenger and bringing impeachment arguments into existence. Now there are lobbyists writing impeachment docs. Well, it's not just the lobbyists. It's yours truly. I drafted my own version of that. And I agree with Rand. I think he's on the mark on this one. Katie Zaudodu says, what is the impeachment sham attempt distracting everyone from? Everyone looks at the shiny penny, but misses the dirty sock in the bushes. What is getting missed through all the noise? Yeah, another way you would put this is, what dog is not barking right now? Okay, it's the dog isn't barking. Identify the dog that isn't barking, because that might be an indication that there's a problem. You know, the analogy here is you've got a house, you've got a dog out in the backyard. If there's trouble, that dog's barking. Looks like there's trouble, but there's no dog barking. What dog is that? Why is that dog not barking? I don't know. You'll have to enlighten us there, Katie. There's a lot of other stuff. We have Joe Sosnowski says guns. Lots of guns. Reference from The Matrix. Neo. Trinity says, what do we need? Neo says, guns. Lots of guns. Guns come shooting out. Loaded up. Excellent movie. One of my favorite movies. We have Brian Hack. I was trained for the OC spray in the Navy. On the deadly force continuum, it sounds that Wheeler just admitted to assaulting another person. Yeah, sounds like it, right? I think it'd be very curious to find out who that other individual was. Now, that other individual is sort of between a rock and a hard place. You know, if he comes out, he is now going up against the mayor. The mayor was the one who filed the report. Law enforcement is probably going to back the mayor, and he may be charged with a crime. He could be charged with disorderly conduct. He could be charged with anything. But I would like to, he could be charged with assault, right? For getting close into somebody's face. Maybe there was some breath emanating out of his mouth that hit Wheeler in the face, and he says that's an assault. But I would like to hear from him. What's his side of the story? And it'd be also curious to see that video he was taking. We have Gordis 1965 says, hi, Faith and Ma. As I see it, he was impeached by the House during his term. Now is the trial in the Senate to see if he is innocent or guilty. So it's a good point, Gordis, and I think that a lot of people agree with you on that one. You know, there's a lot of people who want to see this go to fruition. So my only counterpoint on this is that I got several counterpoints. Let me be serious about it. But so let's flesh out your point a little bit, right? There's one way to interpret the Constitution that says there are two provisions that exist in the impeachment clause. One of them is removal from office, and the other one is the idea that you can be precluded from running again. And so it depends on how you interpret that statute. I interpret it as saying that preclusion from running again follows removal from office. There's an and word in that sentence, removal from office and preclusion from running again in the future. All right. If it's not an and, then you could impeach for either one of those because it would be disjunctive. It would be like changing it to an or. It doesn't say or, it says and. And my reading of it, as other people have also noticed, is that one is contingent upon the other. So it's removal and then preclusion. Removal is not possible anymore because he's not in office. Another interesting point that I had not thought about before, but it was I noticed this over from Jonathan Turley and from Chris Wiseman over on Locals. And they're talking about the concept here that it says the president is referring to the president as in present tense. You know, that whole clause is for a sitting active president, the president, not a former president, not any person who used to be president, the president, as in the present existing president. And so I think there's even more argument about whether or not the impeachment of somebody who's no longer in office is even permissible. But we'll see how it fleshes out. I think a lot of this stuff at this point in time, truthfully, is just academic. I think when we're talking about these constitutional issues, Chief Justice, whether the article was presented with due process in the House, the arguments over snap impeachment, the arguments over when the trial happens, how the trial happens, secret balloting, all of that stuff. I think it's just academic, truthfully. It's very interesting. It is a complicated legal problem that I would hope we could get some answers to, but I'm not expecting that. I think what's going to end up happening is this is going to be a political spectacle, just like the last one was. The Republicans are not going to unify 17 of them to vote in favor of a conviction, as long as Donald Trump doesn't do anything else to agitate them. But at this moment, he's sort of playing the kingmaker here, and as long as he doesn't, throw a rock at the hornet's nest, I don't know that they're going to have the political willpower from their constituencies in their home state to go in and convict a Republican from the Republican Party, somebody as popular amongst Republicans as Donald Trump. So I just don't think it's going to happen as a practical matter. And I also don't think I think I missed another point. So one of my first points when I was responding, I think, to somebody else's question was, political primaries, of course, is a big concern for anybody in office. But another big concern is, remember, these senators, if they vote to convict somebody who's not in office anymore, then that sets a precedent from them that is troubling, because any one of them who's not in office anymore can now be subject to continuing impeachments. And does any senator want to do that, want to jeopardize their potential record after they've left office? So again, this is the bureaucracy investigating itself and, using it for political ends to justify other policy changes and things like that. But they don't want to do anything that's going to hurt them or jeopardize their institutions in the long term. That's why they're not going to vote themselves term limits. And it's why they're not going to vote for impeachment for somebody who's out of office, because that precedent could then be applied to them. And you could just go backwards and forwards and all up and down the line and impeach anybody for whatever you want under that precedent. Marcel Martinez says, got to feel bad for the people who fought in World War II. Is this what they fought for? Weak humans scared of a virus who also cheer for more government control. Right on that, Marcel. Yeah, I feel like this country has certainly lost a bit in more recent generations. I see a lot of people out there who just think that the government is responsible for curing every single ailment of their lives, responsible for everything. They deserve things: free healthcare, free food, free place to live. Everything that they want the federal government to just give it to them. And I think that is just so disappointing. But it's the way things are going. We've got Katie interrogated today with a barrage of medical diagnostic questions by an HVAC company as a condition of service. Is an HVAC company licensed to practice medicine without a license now because of COVID? Yeah, well, Katie, just don't do business with that company, right? If they don't do business according to how you want to do business with them, I would just move on to a different company. Fortunately, there are other companies around. The COVID stuff, I give people a lot of leeway on it. If they want to, be hysterical over every single thing about COVID, they're free to do that. I don't have any problem with that. I have a problem when they start interfering with our allowable economic means. When the government says you can't open your doors, that's a huge problem with me. But if a private company has, hysterical conditions about COVID and you have alternatives, they don't owe you their standard. They don't have to sort of drop their standards down to do business with you. You don't have to raise your standards to do business with them. At least that's how it should be. Now, I don't know your particular situation, but yeah, a lot of COVID hysteria out there. Another one from Seiji Takahara. I think the secret ballot, though, would alleviate the partisan pressures and help stimulate. We have perhaps a secret ballot would let the Democrats vote their conscience. I think that's also true. Not for a Republican benefit, but to lower the partisan pressure on the other side of the aisle. I don't know about that there, Seiji. I think the Democrats are going to vote in lockstep as they normally do. Biden could be going for long-term unity at the cost of short-term unity. By pushing this to its limits, like a mathematician, we can see what pops out. A solid basis as to what this is, what is and is not unconstitutional. So, yeah, I can see that argument. So Biden is wanting to dispose of Trump and his potential to run again in order to bring the country together. I don't personally buy that. I don't think that Republicans are going to be happy with it. I think that it would be, if Donald Trump is convicted, he's going to be a martyr, the likes of which we haven't seen in modern American political history. And that is not going to be good long term. If Antifa wants to end fascism, it's very simple. They should stay home and find a new hobby, because the only fascists in America are them. Yeah, it's wild to see the sort of hypocrisy and irony going on with Antifa. We got Wolfgang Deo says, has anyone here been maced or OC'd? Would you be talking just as peacefully after that? It's a hoax. Okay, we got some alternative theory there. Another one from Seiji. Wait, I don't think anyone would have actually done that to Wheeler at this point in time. Also, Wheeler threw an object at the man after macing him. 2 assault charges. I think this is a hoax and likely from a place of prejudice, a hate crime. Interesting. I had not thought about that. I took it for face value. But you're right. We don't know the other person. Right? We don't know who that individual is. Why not? Sasha Shisha says, how do you find the motivation to wake up and work closer to your goals? I find it hard because the world is so chaotic. I keep asking myself, what's the point? Very good question, Sasha. This is a heavy question. So first and foremost, I think that, the world is so chaotic. I think that's true, but it depends on how you define the world. What is the world? Is it everything on CNN, on Fox News? Is it everything on MSNBC and the Washington Post, on New York Times? Not really. Most of that stuff is I talk about this concept a lot. I use it a lot here at the law firm. A hula hoop. Okay. It's on my existence system. Here it is. So right in the middle of my existence system, I have this hula hoop box. Let's see if you can see this. All right. See that box right there? It says none of my business. None of my business. There's a little circle around there. And in that circle every day, I write HH for hula hoop. And that's my hula hoop. Anything that's inside my hula hoop, that's my business. That's stuff that I should be worried about. Anything that's outside of my hula hoop, it's none of my business. It's just not. Now, oftentimes in life, we will take our hula hoop and we'll extend it over other people, over other problems. We'll turn our little hula hoop that should be our world into this massive hula hoop. And we'll think that that's reality. We'll think that that's our world. And so, Sasha, when you're talking about the world is being chaotic, I'm not sure what you're talking about. If the stuff that's in your hula hoop is chaotic, well, then that's the stuff you got to deal with. But if you're extending your hula hoop, if you're lassoing that over the rest of the world, over into issues that are just really not your business or shouldn't be your business, why are you doing that? Maybe tighten your hula hoop up a little bit. The world will feel less chaotic. And once you have a less chaotic world and you know what's important, remember, politics is chaotic. The world is chaotic, but that's not our lives. Our lives are much more local. Our lives are our family, our friends, our career, our passions, our hobbies. So tighten up that hula hoop. Get clear about what really matters, what should be in there. And then I think things will make a lot more sense for you. We have Wolfgang Deo. Is this actually a body cam? Is that an actual cop? Maybe it's a skit, or perhaps fear raging through the cop's head. What a boop. Yeah, that was a real body cam, and that was a real cop, and it was not anything out of the ordinary. That happens all the time. Pretty disgusting behavior. We have Sharon Quidney. Wow, talk about bad Popo. I guess everybody, including yours truly, is fed up with this whole mask business. Yeah, I think a lot of people are upset about the mask. Good to see you, Sharon. We have Eddie Oliver says, regarding the D.C. riots, the overwhelming majority of these people are being charged, then released on their own recognizance with very little bail being set. Do you really think they will face serious charges? So, Eddie, I've seen sort of both sides of that, honestly. We've covered several different Capitol Hill riot arrests on this channel. Some of them are not being released. They're being released. They're being held without bond. I'm not sure. Last week we talked about Cleveland Grover Meredith Jr., who showed up after, the day after the Capitol Hill riots and was arrested. Originally, he was held without bail. He was not allowed to be out of custody. Now, there were some allegations that there were some mental problems with him, that he was sort of, a danger to himself or to others. And so I think that they were using that medical provision to keep him in. But we talked about another guy, the name escapes me, who just got basically caught with a bunch of ammunition. I think he was being held without bond. Other people are being released on ankle monitoring, and other people are being released on their own recognizance. And so it just sort of, I think there's a smattering of different release conditions, and we just haven't identified a pattern just yet. So instantly everybody was coming to conclusions. Oh, all the white people are getting out. No, all the black people are getting out. All the cops are getting out, right? It's all this sort of, capitalizing on one particular case in order to further a political point. And I just haven't seen a pattern thus far. So I don't know that I would agree with that generalization, but I understand your point. Now, yesterday we talked about an article from the Department of Justice, from the U.S. Attorney's Office, where they're having internal conversations with the FBI, with the Capitol Hill Police, with everybody who's been involved in the investigation. And they were talking specifically about potentially not charging certain groups of people, just saying, nope, they're too, too far removed from the problematic issue here. And I think that's a reasonable way to interpret this stuff. I think there were I don't know 100,000 people there. They're alleging that maybe 800, 900 actually breached the federal property, maybe. And I don't even know what that means. Did they enter the Capitol building, or did they just enter sort of the mall? And so, yeah, naturally a prosecutor and a prosecutor's office, the FBI, the DOJ, whatever, they would be making those charging decisions. They say, okay, all of the people who entered the building, we're going to charge with, this potential category of crimes. Anybody who was just on the property, let's say on the steps, maybe this category, and everybody else, we're just going to say no, because it doesn't reach that threshold of criminality. They have to understand too. I mean, you have to understand this from their perspective. What if they charge a bunch of people? If they overcharge people, you get a bunch of very angry defense attorneys who happen to be good involved, and they push back on those. You may say a series of losses because they just can't prove the level of criminal culpability that they would need in a court of law. And so the prosecutors may just say, we're going to let those ones go. And they're going to pick the cases that they want that are most likely to succeed on the merits. They'll move forward on those. So I think that you'll see some serious charges for some of the people who were, physically violent. I'm not sure if they caught the pipe bomb guy. Those types of individuals absolutely should be prosecuted harshly. Blowing up people at the congressional building, not good. I don't care what political party you're a part of, not good. And, but we also saw pictures of grandma just kind of walking through. Wow, this is crazy. Do I think she's going to be charged with serious crimes? I certainly hope not. And if they're released on their own recognizance, that means that a judge somewhere reviewed the facts of their case, reviewed the affidavit, the probable cause statement submitted by the FBI, and just determined this person's not that big of a threat. Another follow-up question from Eddie Oliver. Good question, Eddie. I saw police letting people into these side buildings. They actually opened the barricades and let people in. How can those people be charged with trespass when they were let in by the police? It's a good question, Eddie. And I think this is actually a good defense. Now, from my perspective, I think if I were a prosecutor, my argument would be they let you in so you didn't kill them, right? That you knew that you shouldn't have been there. You knew that there were barricades, there were a number of cops. You were part of this mob that pushed its way into the building. You knew you shouldn't have been there. That's a criminal trespass. You were also, contributing to potential harm of the police officers before you ever got into the building. And that's a problem, right? That's a crime. And so that's what the prosecutor's response would be. But from a defense perspective, yeah, if they opened the door and let you literally walk through the building, sort of waving you in, we played one of those videos here on this channel. We talked about it. The cops opened the door. One of the first people through the door had the camera recording and shined it on the officer. And the officer said, "I don't agree with you, but I respect you," or something to that effect. And you're going, all right, well, if they just let him in, then how is that trespass? Because you have to breach a barrier. You have to, breach a premises, go through a door, enter in through a window, or you have to be asked to leave and then not leave. That could be a trespass also. And there's a whole kind of slew of laws. So that's another point, in trespass cases. So think about this at a bar. If you're at a bar and you consume too much and they ask you to leave and you don't leave, they have revoked your permission to be there. You are remaining on the premises without permission. That's trespass. Okay, even though they voluntarily let you into the building. So you could say the same type of thing could have happened here, right? Everybody's inside the building because the cops opened the door and let them in. And then if the cops were sort of asking everybody to leave thereafter and they refused to leave, that might be also a trespass charge. So I understand your point. I think it's going to be a very common defense strategy just to say, hey, we didn't know. Something happened up front. There was a big mob of people. I didn't see any violence. I wasn't a part of any of that. But when we got up there, let's say 10 minutes later after the building had already been breached, cops had already stood down. We saw barricades opening up. People there legitimately could have thought, listen, this is not the first time that a Capitol building has been stormed, let's say. Okay, this has happened many times in the country, not at the Capitol building, but in other localities. I think in California in the 1950s or 1960s, the Black Panther Party did it. There's a number of other examples of where organized groups will go in and I think they did it during the Kavanaugh hearings in D.C. They just kind of, fill in the building and they say, hey, this is the people's house. This is the people's building. And we're allowed to be here. We're protesting. We're protesting peacefully, but it's our house and we want to have our voice heard. Okay, and those people don't get prosecuted for insurrection. Now, this is a little bit of a different standard because of the violence, because of the force that was used, because of the damage done to the building, because of the threats that were made, bad text messages back and forth. So I'm not condoning the behavior. I'm not excusing it at all. But I am saying that there may have been another contingent, another group of these people who were there at the Save America rally who just didn't observe any of that problem. And it's by the time they got up to the front of the building, they may have just been presuming that it was open. I don't know what happened up there, but the doors are open. There are people coming in and out of the building. I think it's an open door now. And so they never were, it was never confirmatory to them that they were not allowed to be there. Should they have known? Yeah, of course, right? Everybody, right? We all know. If you're speaking man to man with somebody, hey, do you think you should have gone into that building? Probably not, right? Good question, Eddie. We have another one from Chris Wolney. National security is the most abused color of law ever, especially for cover-ups. We may never know the full truth of the Capitol Hill breach on 1/6. And that's kind of where I was going with this, Chris. I think that it is going to be something that is, answers to this issue aren't particularly useful. If the government does an investigation and finds that the government blew this whole thing badly, that's not good for the government. Okay, they want to say that this was all the Trump supporters. This was all everybody on the outside. It's not our fault. It's their fault. That gives them some tools that they can use to pass new laws, new regulations, to start, banning people and investigating people for their speech and their associations. If you just say, the government should have been more prepared and they dropped the ball like 3 times. That's why this happened. Not because Trump's people were maniacs, but because the government was incompetent. That's not a good look. And everybody in the bureaucracy is going to be doing everything they can to avoid that narrative being crafted. Isaac Castillo says, happy Tuesday, Robert. I heard Locals is going to have a live stream option soon. Good stuff. Keep up the good work. Thank you, Isaac. Yeah, it is, which is why we're sort of moving things over there. I think it's a good home base. There are some other lawyers over there, some other content creators that I follow pretty regularly are over there. Just a good group of people. The platform, I think, is maturing. We started uploading content to them, I'd say about a year ago. and the platform just wasn't quite ready yet. I didn't like it, but I went back over there as soon as we got canceled off that chat server, and I like it. It's maturing along. I saw, Dave Rubin is somebody who's big with that platform. I think he's an investor or maybe an owner or a founder or something like that. I don't know, but he posted on Twitter that there's just a massive flow of people going that direction. So I would certainly invite you to go check it out. I'm really pushing to grow that, because if we hit a certain threshold, then it unlocks more options for us in terms of uploading, I think, unlimited videos, and it's more tools that we can use to provide more value, which is why I'm encouraging everybody to just go sign up over there. We have Eddie Oliver says, forgot to mention, I did not anywhere near the Capitol building. I stayed behind the barriers and filmed. So Eddie Oliver is in the clear. Did not go anywhere near the Capitol building. I stayed behind the barriers and filmed. Another question. This looks like it may have come over from Facebook or something. Hey, Robert, Hey, Robert, I have a question. I don't give YouTube my credit info. Why isn't anyone talking about an organized communication campaign to several specific officials and news media? This is exemplified by the U.S. Constitution as step number 1. I find it odd no one is orchestrating something like paper letters and public decrees to show the genuine will of the people. Thank you. And that's from Andy. Organized communication campaign to several specific officials and news media. Okay, so I see what you're saying. So why is there no sort of organized public paper trail where people are sending letters or organizing communication to communicate to the people in charge? I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I know that there are, I think, a lot of things being formulated at this point in time. I think that Matt Brainard just started a new organization that's focused on tech censorship, and I think there's somebody else, I can't remember who did it, but I think a lot of the dust is still settling right now, if I can be honest with this. I think a lot of people were caught off guard by the deplatforming of Trump, by the literal deletion off of the internet of Parler. People are being canceled all over the place. They're filing ethics complaints against sitting senators. Josh Hawley had an ethics complaint. Now he's filing an ethics complaint on the people who filed an ethics complaint against him. And so he's having his own little ethics party, and we're having an impeachment party. And the whole thing is just kind of a mess right now. A lot of dust in the air. But once that settles, I think people will be more organized, and we may see some more movement, some more efforts in that regard. Good to see you, Andy. Thanks for the question. Isaac Castillo, what do you think about having a top 10 FOIA party at 100K subscribers and have your viewers each send off a FOIA request? I'm sure Tom Fitton at Judicial Watch would be an instant fan. Yeah, FOIAs. I'm learning a little bit more about FOIAs from this guy called Technofog on Twitter, and he's also on Telegram these days. And Technofog is he's a lawyer, and he is somebody who is very aggressive with his FOIA requests. And I've never seen FOIA requests sort of used as aggressively as this guy. And he has instructions for them, and he's giving people very clear instructions on how to request a good one. You got to be specific about it. You have to detail exactly what you want. You got to put some beginning and end dates on it. You got to identify the individuals, identify the material. And he's just like, just fire them off. Just go. Just fire them off all the time. I kind of like it. It's kind of a shotgun approach. So just ask for everything and then see what they get back to you. Usually I've used it more like a scalpel. He's using it like a shotgun. And so it's kind of an interesting approach. Just send them, just blow them up with FOIA requests. So Isaac, yeah, listen, I am curious about a lot of this. I think we're going to be probably filing a lot of those myself. If you have any suggestions on stuff that we should be covering or areas that we should ask for, FOIA request is the Freedom of Information Act. I don't know if I glossed over that, but it's an act. You can go get formal government documents. There's a lot of open meeting laws, open records laws, and so under FOIA you can get that stuff. And so Isaac, I'd be certainly open to organizing that. And I think Locals is probably a good place to do that. So if you have any suggestions, please throw them over there. Thanks for the idea. We have Kenneth Slayer says, if they listened in 100 years, no one gets violent. If they listened in 100 years, no one gets violent. Yeah, we don't want any violence. Kenneth Slayer. Of course not. We have Yum Yum for Dum Dum by Kat Brumette. Says, Leaky in hospital. If he can't do the trial, who would? Leahy's in the hospital? That's not good. Wow. Okay. That's not good at all. I hope he's all right. But it's a good question. I don't know. If Senator Leahy cannot do the trial, what would happen? Is Chief Justice Roberts going to do it? I don't think he wants to do it. I think he probably has an inkling here that this is not particularly constitutional and probably doesn't want to jeopardize the legitimacy of the court by getting involved in this political spectacle. So if it's not Leahy, who is it? I don't know. Maybe Kamala. Maybe Kamala can do it. Maybe Joe Biden can do it. Maybe they can just appoint Nancy Pelosi to do it. Does it have to be a senator? There's a lot of people in there who would like to do it. We have another one from Kevin Bergman. Constitutional Party, please. Love your work. I could get behind a constitutional party for sure. Anything that sort of rolls back the massive behemoth of the federal government and scales it back down to something that's more in alignment with the Constitution, I would be very, very in favor of that. I think that throughout the years, the bloat has just exploded to the point that it's unmanageable in this country and it needs to be flushed away. We have Tim Crescenzo says Title 28 U.S. Code 300215 says United States is a federal corporation. There you go. It's a corporation. I haven't read that one. Thank you, Tom. What are the implications of that? I don't know. We have Kevin Bergman. Wheeler Videotaper is a local law partner and heir to Alpenrose Dairy. So has he been identified? So he's out there. All right, man. We are just getting all sorts of crowdsourced information today. I love it. Thank you for that, Kevin. We have S. Love. So Cruz is asking the ones in the bill to vote themselves out of a cush job. Never going to happen. Are there any alternatives to get this done? I'm glad you asked, S. Love. Yeah, there is. We can have a convention of the states and we can amend the Constitution ourselves. We don't even need Congress to do it. And I think that's probably a good alternative. I would like to see something like that happen. I think that we'll never see any results out of our federal elected officials unless we, the people, as the states, come together and hold a state convention. I think it would be a good time to talk about term limits. I think it would also be a very good time to talk about a digital Bill of Rights, as civil rights for the digital era. I think it is very pertinent. People are more and more online than they are offline these days. I mean, you're always connected to the internet. You're always checking something. You're always communicating. And you're now locked down in your home, so you can't even go out into the public square anymore. You can't go out and do things in public. So now since you're locked down, we've all gone online. Everything's digital. So why wouldn't a lot of the same civil rights, a lot of the same freedoms that we have in our daily life, in the physical world, why wouldn't those apply digitally? Because now we're all online. And I think that the only way that we're going to get anything like that through is with a convention of the states. And I'm still toying around with that idea myself. We have Seji. How can free speech and peaceably assemble be restricted or limited by the government? What does unabridged mean then? Prosecute the commanding. Well, I understand your point. Yeah, this is just something that's been interpreted by the Supreme Court over years, I mean, decades, centuries, really, since the founding of the country. And they've just decided that some speech is protected, some speech is in alignment with the founders' vision under the First Amendment, and some speech isn't. And you spent a lot of time on this in constitutional law in law school. It's two full semesters, and you have just a big chunk of one of those semesters is all about the First Amendment. I mean, it's massive because it covers a lot. Speech, assembly, petition for grievances, and on and on and on. And it's a lot of case law. And at some point, somebody used free speech in a way that the Supreme Court didn't like, and they sort of narrowed that down a little bit. And it feels like it's continuing to get narrowed. Now we're talking about hate speech and extremism, and anything that you say is now potentially disqualifying from certain things in this country. I think that is out of alignment with what the underlying vision was. SSW Lamb. Could you please, hi Rob and Miss Faith, could you please explain Trump's office of the former president? Is that the movement to primary out of the swamp GOPs, the president in exile? So I don't know what it is, to be honest. I think it's just a branding play. I mean, it's kind of funny. It's kind of the opposite of the office of the president-elect. And if you recall, when Obama did that, when Obama was the office of the president-elect, he got just skewered over that. Well, there is no office of the president-elect. What are you talking about? That's not a government official, entity. So what are you talking about? And then Joe Biden did it also, right? Office of the president-elect. And all of the conservatives were sort of skewering him over that. That's not a federal government official, right? You understand that's not a real office. It's not a real office, you know. Well, now Trump just says, well, it's the office of the former president. I just started my own office. So what do you have to say about that, everybody? You know, look, I think it's a branding play. I think it's actually pretty brilliant, right? He can call himself a former president and he can just spam that all over the place. Office of the former president versus what's he going to call it? You know, Trump PAC or something, Trump PAC or whatever. He can just call it the office of the former president. Use the seal and just keep running with that in eternity. It sort of looks like he's got some sort of legitimate claim to authenticity or credibility, legitimacy. And I think it's pretty hilarious. Now, I don't know what it means. I don't think it means anything. I think it's just a branding organization that's going to allow him to continue to exercise his influence on the GOP and the country at large. I mean, the country is still having this whole impeachment thing go on. It's all, you know, Donald Trump's still in the spotlight. He's not in the presidency anymore, but they're still talking about him. They're still thinking about him. Still mad about him. So I think that's about it. I think that's all it is. It's just an organizational structure that gives him some options. We got another one from Seji. Seji says, Australia is actually a U.S. corporation. I think Economics Explained did a piece on it. However, it was to let businesses put money in to save the economy. You know, I don't know much about the U.S. as a corporation or what the practical implications of that are. I've seen a lot of this in some of those kind of fringy movies out there that the U.S. is a corporation and like the people are chattel of the corporation. You know, we're all just like little sheep and we all just produce revenue in the form of taxation, and it goes into this conspiratorial stuff and all of that. And I don't know much about it beyond that. Okay, very surface level stuff, but I know that a lot of people don't like that concept, but I don't understand what the point is or what the ramifications are of the U.S. being a corporation or why that's a big deal. We have Wolfgang says, let's have a weekly Saturday MAGA rallies like the Korean Republican Party that marches the streets of Seoul for their beloved impeached President Park. Well, I don't know about that there, Wolfgang. You know, the MAGA rallies, I'm not sure how useful those are. We have Turd Ferguson says, are you a paid spokesman for the Scottsdale Travel and Tourism Board? Asking for a friend. Also, impeach Roberts for refusing to preside over impeachment. There you go. Turd Ferguson's on the money. Turd Ferguson, by the way, is going to be the deputy chairman of the new impeachment party. Guess who's going to be the chairman? Yours truly. We're going to just impeach the hell out of everybody all over the place. And John Roberts is on the list, by the way. He is abdicating his duty to preside over an impeachment trial, which is infuriating to a lot of people. Some might even say inciting an insurrection. So add him to the list. Add them all. Roberts, Trump's impeached now, impeach Pence, impeach Kamala, impeach them all for their incitement of insurrection. No, Turd, I'm not a spokesman for the Scottsdale Travel and Tourism Board. I am on a different Scottsdale board, though, that's involved with judicial appointments. You'll notice over this upcoming year, I'm going to have to start the show, I think, early on about a once a month basis. So it'll be about 2 hours early because I have to make it to a board meeting for the city of Scottsdale. It's called the Judicial Advisory Appointments Board. I'm on that board and we've got a big year ahead of us. A couple judges are up for renomination. And so I've got a role to play in that. But as far as travel and tourism goes, no, I should be though, because at the opening of every show, I say, in the always beautiful and sunny Scottsdale, Arizona. It's like an endorsement. But no, officially, I'm not on a board. Teresa Child says, Serenity Prayers is another great way to deal with the chaos of the world. The Serenity Prayer is a great prayer. It's God, or whatever your higher power is. Grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Very powerful prayer, also on my existence system. We have Isaac Castillo says, add 1 part punitive action to 1 part social indifference equals the current administration. That's a pretty fair synopsis. But I think that they would say that they're very socially involved. So it's socially indifferent to one segment of the country and very socially active for another. Thank you, Isaac. We have Beth says, Grasshopper, life is chaos. Master, no worries. There is hoop. Oh, you see what happened there? Hoop. Closely related to hope. But yes, Grasshopper. Life is chaos. we define ultimately a lot of how we interact and live in this world. And so I'm reading this book. I mentioned this yesterday, The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle, I think is how you say his last name. And it's very, very much about living in your own world, living in now. Stop letting your mind, you are not your mind. You are not the product of your thoughts. You're actually something else. But we don't know that because we live in our minds. We're talking to ourselves all day. We're, rehashing conversations. I should have said this, or I should have done this, or I can't believe I did that, or I'm supposed to do that, right? We're looking sideways, backwards, forwards, and it's very, very turbulent in our minds. And so if we can master that a little bit better, we can live more peaceful lives. I'm reading a lot of those books these days. Eddie Oliver says, I was in D.C. There were easily 600,000 people in the area I was at. I'm a vet and I know what several battalions look like. Wow, that is a ton of people. Okay, so that number's bigger than the number I was using. Let's say there's 1,000 people who did something bad at the Capitol Hill riots and there were 100,000 other people. That's nothing. Eddie Oliver is saying there were 600,000 people. And so they're trying to throw all of those people into this one bucket of insurrectionists. That's not fair. Thank you, Eddie. Another one from Cheryl Myers says, I am supposed to ask customer COVID info before meeting with them and have them sign paperwork verifying their answers. It's the insurance company pushing for release of liability. I refuse to ask a person's medical info. Yeah. It's those damn lawyers suing everybody. Jerks. And you're right. Look, you got to take precautions. You got to do what's best for your business. You got to do what's best for your clientele. We have precautions here at our office. We've got masks. We've got sanitations. We've got 3 different conference rooms people bounce around at. And, we've got the temperature thing and we got the whole thing. So we're all just trying to do the best we can. I'm really hopeful that as a result of COVID, we don't see just a number of lawsuits, people suing everybody for COVID stuff. I don't think there's much of that going on, but I know that it's subject to a lot of debate right now. A lot of laws and lawyers, and everybody's trying to determine how to deal with the fallout from the liability of COVID. And businesses are freaked out. Small businesses are freaked out because if they get one lawsuit, that could be the end of their business. So, you have to have a little bit of compassion when dealing with COVID stuff, whether it's masks or whatever, because you just don't really know what the other person's situation is. And so if I don't like dealing with that, if somebody comes into my office, in my business, in my place where I work personally and say, you got to wear a mask. No, I'm not going to do that. But if I'm going to somebody else's business and they say, hey, do you mind throwing a mask on? Okay, no problem. Happy to do that for you. We have Alan Ferguson says, Secret Service protectee Pence was in the Capitol raising criminal bar, special national security event. Okay, that's interesting. It was in the Capitol raising criminal bar, special national security event. Thank you, Alan. Not sure about that, but sounds like it's interesting. Thanks for sharing. We have George Cortez. Can a mayor be impeached? Absolutely. Absolutely. Ted Wheeler just made the list. Thank you, George, for bringing that up. Couple more before we wrap up the show. We've got Brian Coker says, just showing support. Don't forget to subscribe. Great show as always. Countdown to 100K. Thank you so much, Brian. I appreciate that. Yeah, we're getting close. It has been the longest journey ever. We were growing so fast, and then YouTube came out and they said, you're in the penalty box, boys and girls. You are talking about dangerous things. And I read through the rules on YouTube, and they are actually they're actually saying that in the open now. They're saying if it's borderline content, it's in the rules. Go read it. It says if it's borderline content, they're going to reduce the distribution. And so for a long time, I've been suspecting that. But Susan Wojcicki over at YouTube, who's the CEO of YouTube, just released her newsletter for January, and it just details there. You can go read the rules. Maybe I'll cover it in the show tomorrow. But it says if it's borderline, they're going to penalize the distribution of your content in favor of what they're calling more authoritative content. So who's more authoritative than us? Well, the people you would suspect, right? The people who YouTube thinks is more authoritative. It's going to be the big news corporations. They're allowed to talk about the election. They're allowed to talk about the Capitol Hill riots, about legal analysis, about political analysis. But other people like us, because we use some dangerous language or controversial thought, or we sort of approach it from an alternative angle, that's not as authoritative, and they are going to diminish our reach as a result, which is a bummer. But that's all right. We'll get to 100K. We'll just keep grinding on through it anyways. We've got some other ideas about how to expand the footprint of the show in different areas. We're talking to Mr. Ma about that. I just had a meeting with Miss Faith about that today. So I'm pretty excited about where this is going, but it is taking us just a little bit. I've been waiting to get to 100K, not because I care about the 100K. I mean, I'm very excited about that. It's going to be a huge goal for us. But guess who's coming on the show as soon as we hit that mark? Miss Faith, right back there. She's going to be coming on the program, and I'm excited for everybody to meet her. So I can't wait for that. We got a couple more. Last one, it looks like, from Turd Ferguson. Says, breaking, Schumer decided on Dominion machines to record the Senate impeachment vote. Squishy rhinos is not a well-hidden secret. Don't think it would work. Yeah, so bring in Dominion. Yeah, I was thinking about that. You know, if Turd is obviously the deputy campaign person for the impeachment party, the deputy chair. And we were talking about this yesterday. You know, if this impeachment party really goes forward and we want to impeach every member of Congress, it's a tall order, because now we got to get them to vote for their own impeachment. So we can't go into the House of Representatives and ask them to impeach themselves. Like, that's ridiculous. But Turd Ferguson just brings up an excellent point here. What about bringing in Dominion to measure the votes? And Turd, I agree with you. I think we should do two things. Number one, we just have all of these senators and the House Congress people vote by mail. Pretty easy to do that. Just change some rules. Courts don't even care. Just change whatever rules you want. The courts don't care. Okay, so we change that so the senators vote by mail. And then we have Dominion count them. And then we can just get whatever votes we want. Not even a question. Last one from a couple more. Seji says, the Popos and the feds are getting a lot of experience prosecuting individuals in a mob. Perhaps the first one's charge will fall through, and then the Popos and feds go back and prosecute all Antifa, BLM, or other peaceful rioters from last year. Wouldn't hold your breath on that one there, Seji. I think that they are going to get a different set of rules. Another one from Zalorarg says, what do you think of Trump's reaction to the storming? Couldn't he send the National Guard on his own volition? So I don't think that Trump's reaction was particularly good. I mean, I think that the way Trump handled it, I don't actually know how he handled it. You know, there are some news articles saying, you know, they're saying that he was sort of poo-pooing the whole thing, just thinking that this was much ado about nothing. And it didn't feel that way to me. You know, there were some stories that he didn't even call Mike Pence, and he didn't do this, and he didn't do this, and he was sort of asleep at the wheel. You know, Nero fiddles while Rome burns was sort of the story there. But it was from the standard, you know, the standard fare people in the media, and I just don't know. You know, I don't know what his response was. I think that this speech was probably not as wise as you would hope. Right, the crowd was very aggressive, very angry that particular day. But I'm not sure that anything Donald Trump did or said caused them to do what they did. I think that there were people who were there that were going to do that regardless of anything that Trump said. And so to preclude him from giving a speech at a rally that was intended to, you know, bolster support for his constitutional arguments. You can say that, you know, they were not good arguments, or they were ill-advised, or they had no merit to them. You can make that claim. But what was supposed to take place on January 6th was operation according to the Constitution. Senator Ted Cruz objected. Josh Hawley objected. They're allowed to do that. That's not insurrection. Donald Trump's allowed to give a speech at a rally addressing a constitutional mechanism that exists under our system of government. He's allowed to do all of those things. You can call it reckless, you can call it whatever you want to call it, but it's not incitement as far as I can tell. And, you know, could he have responded to it better? Probably. Could he have responded faster? Yes, but that's all hindsight. You know, that's all hindsight is 2020. And, you know, I think he was kind of caught off guard as well as the rest of us were. And he's paying a price for it, right? He got impeached again. We're going to see where it goes. A couple other ones. Chairman of the board says, more support. I'm also Brian Coker. Oddly, YouTube won't seem to let me type the word subscribe without blocking my super chat. Interesting. Okay, so that's why you split that up. Very weird. P.S. I would like to humbly throw my name in the hat to be the secretary of the impeachment party. But, ladies and gentlemen, we are building this party in real time, the impeachment party. And this is going to be big. If you want to get in on the fun, this is the time, because we are putting stakes in the ground. We've got Turd Ferguson. We got chairman of the board. We're we're about to make history. I'm pretty excited. We've got some awesome people on the team. Another one from Turd before we wrap up. Number 20, defund Popo. 21, help unmasked COVID criminal. So 20, defund Popo. 21. Thank you, Turd. All right. So you just see we are, we're making things happen here, folks. So let's wrap up the program so that we can go on about our nights and then be ready to go and rock and roll tomorrow. I want to thank all of our very, very, very appreciated supporters over on Locals. Yesterday, we went through some of our new members. Very recently, over last night, we got Fish Cat joined, Sliding Edge, Steve-O, 9300. We got Cat Crap Fever, who signed up. We got Sharon Quidney, of course, Shifra Lynn. We got Lady Anderson, Marcy Jankovic. We got Blue Eyed Hillbilly, Cody Bear 1, Sach joined up, and Anano Missy. They are supporting us over at Locals. The web address down there is watchingthewatchers.locals.com. And I can never forget to thank Miss Faith Joy at Faith Joy, our show prep, and just the all around the best. Followed up there by Ma Fox, who is our moderator and who's very, very helpful at helping us do what we do. And so we thank them. Thank you for the support and for all the love that you send to the show. If you're not familiar with Locals, here's what we've got over there. We've got my book, Beginning to Winning, is available. You can download a copy of that for free, or you can buy it on Amazon. We've got our impeachment party templates. So this is an actual impeachment document that I drafted. You just fill in the blanks there on the yellow parts, put your politician in, put their elected position in, and then impeach the hell out of them. Then we've got our existence systems over here. I did a whole video on that on New Year's Day. You can check that out. All of the show slides are going to be available over on Discord. I'm sorry, not on Discord. Discord, we don't say that word around here. Over on Locals. Locals. And of course, the most important reason to join is conversation with great people down there in the bottom right. And Miss Faith put that together. Isn't that beautiful? She's just outstanding. Round of applause for Faith. Well done. She's going to be on the program soon enough, as soon as we get that 100K. So why not subscribe? If you're watching this and you haven't already subscribed, if there's no reason other than to see Faith, that's a good enough reason. I mean, that's really the only reason that matters, to subscribe, to like, to share the video, to invite somebody to come and join us as we go through the show. There's a lot that you can get out over on Locals. One more time, watchingthewatchers.locals.com. Check it out. We really want to get over 1,000 members over there. Don't have to pay anything. I just need you to sign up so we can get those unlocked benefits and post full videos and unlimited files and all that stuff. So we really appreciate it if you check this out. Before we sign off, I want to remind you that I am a criminal defense attorney here at the R&R Law Group in Scottsdale. We handle cases all over Arizona. So if you happen to know anybody who's facing criminal charges, who has an old criminal record they want to clear up, who has a mugshot they want to get off the internet, who has an old warrant that they need to quash, anything related to criminal law at all in the state of Arizona, we're very good at what we do. And we have a mission to help provide people with safety, clarity, and hope in their cases and in their lives. And we would be honored and humbled if you sent them our way so that we could lend a hand. We make sure that everybody who comes to our office leaves with a copy of my book and leaves in a better position than when we found them, whether they hire us or not. We can always provide value and help people get through a difficult time in their lives. So be very honored if you send them our way. We'd very much appreciate it. Free case evaluations, and of course, all of the information is available for you in the description below. That's it, my friends. I want to thank you so much for joining us yet again. We're going to be back here same time, same place tomorrow. Arizona, we start 5 p.m., which is 5 p.m. Mountain Time. On the West Coast, you're going to see us start at 4 p.m. over in California and in Ted Wheeler's burning city of Portland. We're also going to be live at 6 p.m. in Central Texas time, and then 7 p.m. on the East Coast. Man, I had a little difficult time flubbing through the time zones in our country, but you know when we start. We want to make sure that you are here and with us. Everybody have a wonderful evening. Sleep very well. I will see you back here tomorrow. Bye-bye.